Let me know when we're starting.
Oh, Matt, shut up, man. Why have you... Where's Johnny? Why are you all eating?
It's dinner time, isn't it?
Dinner time?
In it, yeah. It's dinner time, in it.
Hey, oh my God. Surrounded by unprofessionals. I would
Is that how you
never,
do the British slang?
I would never in a million years think to eat during a podcast, especially one that is presented by T-Mobile. Because welcome to episode 51 of Plat Chat, presented by T-Mobile. Where's Johnny? Where's he gone?
I don't know. I think he's gone to make some coffee or something. Get caffeine in it. I don't know, Bren.
I can hear him grinding coffee.
Honestly, though, if there were people who just listen to this on like audio platforms, like Johnny could probably not be here the whole episode. Nobody would know the difference.
I can hear him grinding the coffee in the background.
I'll be done soon. We can start.
Yeah, it's the most. It's the most noise Johnny's ever made on the show.
I'm ignoring Matt's comment.
How does Bren deal with this as the bastion of professionalism now?
I wanted to tell you all a lovely little story that happened to me, actually, when I was getting involved. You know, I've been getting involved in Magic the Gathering a lot recently.
No, I don't. Tell me about it.
Well, okay, I'll tell you what I've been doing. So I've been getting deep into, like, the investment aspect of Magic the Gathering, of buying and selling cards and stuff. And part of the comes of that is that what I found out is that there's set territories in Los Angeles that various card barons, they call them the card barons, they control this territory, and they are they're the dealers of the cards in set areas.
Smugglers.
Yeah, well, not quite smugglers, but they are. If you're trying to buy or sell cards, you've got to go through them because otherwise you're skirting past their territory. You're going behind
like the
back.
Drug dealers of Magic the Gathering cards.
Kind of, yeah.
Really does sound like drug dealing.
So I've been trying to get involved in that, and I noticed that there's this whole thing with an underground magic scene that you're not really supposed to talk about, but I've been getting involved in it anyway. And in Los Angeles, so what I've been doing is I've been going out trying to find some of the local barons, seeing if there's any good deals, because I've been pulling some good cards out of my packs. And I've been trying to get some decent amount back so I can then invest it into even more gambling, which is what I've just been doing over the course of the COVID break, just buying boxes and gambling it. And I found myself in an area of Los Angeles that I didn't really know too well. I've never really been there too many times.
Oh,
it was pretty dark. It was about 3 p.m. and because of the smoke, it was actually looked like it was 10 p.m. And I was going around the streets of an unusual place. Now, luckily, again, I had T-Mobile, so I was able to find where exactly I was, roughly where the meeting point was. But the issue then lied when I entered. Where is Johnny going?
I don't know.
It's walked off. Anyway, the issue then lied with me trying to enter the place because you needed to exchange a passcode to even get let into this kind of establishment. All socially distanced, of course. I was wearing a mask. The guy was standing 6 feet away from the door when he slid it open. Don't know how he managed it, but he did it. And he asked me what the passcode was. I said the passcode. Came, of course, strapped, as you have to with this when you're carrying.
He was with a gun?
Say again?
Strapped?
No, strapped with my phone.
Oh,
of course, right.
Just in case there's trouble, you can call the police or something. Came strapped. And I had in my backpack, I had all my expensive Magic the Gathering cards. I got about $1,000 worth in my backpack that I'm trying to offload. And they let me in eventually, and I have to go through various security measurements to ensure that I'm not carrying anything illegal, like any Black Lotuses. You can't be carrying those into a standard tournament. That's not allowed at all. And I get eventually down, and I'm going down the steps of this place, of this establishment.
Into the basement. Yeah,
into the basement where a lot of the deals are done. And I'm starting to panic and sweat a little bit. I'm starting to worry a little bit because the beads of sweat come down my head because I'm like, this doesn't seem right. I grew up on the streets of Gloucester. I'm street smart. I know when a deal's about to go south. This looked odd. They had barred the entrance to the door that I was going into. I was going into the basement. There wasn't really much going on.
But they were all staying 6 feet away.
Oh, yeah, 6 feet away, of course. Because
big basement.
My fantasy league is just one of my players has started to play. Anyway, I get down there and I'm starting a negotiation process with the kingpin of Culver City, and we're getting into negotiations. I'm showing him what I've got on offer as well. I got a bunch of different cards from various sets, various years, and he's trying to pull a fast one on me.
No.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Yeah, he's trying to pull a fast one on me. He's misquoting prices. Of course, this is all happening 6 feet apart. He's misquoting prices. He's telling me that it's actually the cards I've got are lightly played instead of mint condition, when I know for a fact they're mint condition because I've literally just pulled them. Yeah,
and you're in his territory as well.
I'm in his territory, so I don't really have
in
much
a place
leeway.
You don't know.
And he starts giggling. I'll try and do my best impression of him. And he starts.
That's a giggle.
You fool! You have walked into my basement, where you no longer have any sort of internet connection to double check the prices of your magic cards. What are you going to do now? And that's when I look down at my phone. I look in the top right corner.
What are you talking about?
And you know what I saw?
What did you see?
5G, dude.
5G bars, baby. Full strength. Full throttle, baby. You already know I got that T-Mobile on lock. Because you know they got America's largest 5G network covering 215 million people nationwide in nearly 6,000 cities and towns. And even better, the nationwide 5G network works indoors and outdoors, covering thousands of miles, while the competition only covers city blocks. And you know that helped me out when I was making those underground Magic the Gathering deals, baby. So rank up and take your wireless game to the next level with T-Mobile. Visit T-Mobile.com today, and maybe you won't get scammed when you're making your next Magic the Gathering underground deal.
Did you start the show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome to Plat Chat, Johnny, episode 51, presented by T-Mobile. Sorry, I've already let it in with my story of the week as well, you know? So,
that was very good. Definitely something that really happened, Bren. I'm glad that we heard from that.
Yeah. It's like
I see how it is. Bren doesn't tell stories when I'm actually around, so
yeah, that's why we had to cancel Foreheads.
Yeah.
Well, he knows you're not going to react to the stories. You're just going to sit there.
What are we talking about today?
I don't react in cinemas either, do I? If I watch an amazing movie, I don't just start clapping in the middle of the film.
Yeah, you're a clapper in movies. I feel it.
I can't retell the story. It's like it's.
All right.
That's fine. That's fine.
much.
We don't need to hear it again.
Yeah, I'm not even sure people. I'm not sure people enjoyed hearing the story the first time. They just want to hear about 5G from T-Mobile.
It was an entertaining story, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great story, Ben. Don't even worry about it. But we're here to talk about Overwatch.
Yeah, let's talk about Overwatch. And this is something that all of the everybody who's involved in the competitive scene was really interested. Where's Johnny's gone again?
I don't know.
Let him go.
Pouring us coffee. This is something that all the competitive scene was asking us again and again and again. Please, can you talk about this? Please, can you talk about this? Please, can you talk about this? Well, we're going to talk about it. The Overwatch comic released on Monday. This little teaser here. I actually haven't read it yet. What the fuck is Johnny doing?
I don't know.
I have not read the comic either, but it looks cool as hell.
Yeah.
Has anyone here read the comic?
No, but what's important is that it also there's going to be like a skin in the game around it. There's like cool. They do the events with different heroes. This one will be a Tracer event.
So it's just like a little story in London of when Tracer was in London with a little skin as well.
It's pretty sick, and
it's also I'm flicking through the comic now. It's pretty cool. It's a full 24-page comic with a fleshed out storyline. It's very emotive. It doesn't seem to be the normal like a lot of the stuff in Overwatch is very what's the right word for it? It's like very much about the game. It's like almost stylizing the stuff that they would do through the game. It's like, oh, we're going on an adventure. We're going to kill some baddies. Yada yada yada. There isn't too much of like the characters really talking to each other that much. That's more reserved for the cinematics, I feel. But this has got a lot of
the first comic in 2 years, right?
Yep. They also partnered with Dark Horse Comics to do this as well.
So
that's probably why it's a little bit longer. Like,
I love this though. Like this is what got so many people invested in Overwatch, right? It's like the lore and the characters. Yeah. Like, the more of this you write, the more you flesh it out. Next thing you know, you got Netflix knocking on your door for a little series.
Yeah. This is how you get, like, people involved, right? And how you build a universe. Like, one of my favorite things, actually, is, I think, very limited edition. They print, like, physical copies or something. And I've actually gone out of my way to ask every time if I can get it in physical copy, just so I can save all the comics. And like in 20 years, just like look back at the physical.
The skin looks awesome, by the way.
This is the cool stuff that you can like tell your kids about.
I put the video in the Discord for Kurt, but they kind of tease the. That is not the skin. That is Bren's.
That wasn't the video. Sorry, that was wrong video.
Yeah, wrong video. They teased the skin though, and it looks actually really nice. Like it's like a
showed
pink
that,
looking
Matt.
Tracer skin. It looks pretty dope.
We're already seeing it. We're already showing it.
The end of the comic as well says it has like not a trailer, but it has like a little thing about what the next issue is going to be about as well. So presumably this is like a series of comics. I don't know how quickly they're going to be released, but it's stuff for people to look forward to as well. I love that they do this kind of stuff. I feel like this is something that Overwatch does maybe the best out of a lot of other games.
Did you ever read the TF2 comics, Josh?
Yes, I did actually. Yeah, the TF2 comics were very funny. Yeah. It's a very different world to Overwatch where you can be much more, I don't know, much more adult with the humor because Overwatch is very much more like the focused around kids. It's not focused around kids, but it has to be open to kids as well. Whereas TF2 was just like mental. Just mental.
Making allegations that the spy was the scout's father and all sorts.
What?
Yeah. The sniper ended up being from like
roast the scout for having sex with his mom.
Say what?
What?
That was just a normal recurring
and also
joke.
I think the sniper
comic.
ended up being from Atlantis City, like the underwater city of Atlantis.
Possibly.
I think you said Atlantic City, New Jersey. I was like, what?
No.
Like, why did they make a character from Atlantic City?
Apparently, they came to the conclusion that New Zealand was a made-up place in the comic as well, as like a running gag because New Zealand was never included on the maps.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, they just kind of retconned an entire country. And
sarcasm from Matt. That sounds hilarious. That's really funny, guys.
I missed out on what was this game? TF2? Yeah, I missed out on yeah.
All right, well. We don't have to talk about the comics anymore, Matt, if you don't want to talk about it. I think it's pretty cool. If you don't like comics, that's fair enough.
Any type of lore or story content they give us is awesome. The fans want it. We want it. I mean, fans of even the Overwatch League are just huge fans of the game of Overwatch in general. This is the type of stuff that kind of keeps that alive, right? So the more of this, the better, I think.
All right, let's look over now the competitive side then, because I want to talk about what we've actually witnessed this weekend. Not a lot happened, to be honest. It wasn't really anything eventful.
No, not an important week in the Overwatch League.
Not really that important. But
just another week.
Do you just want to do the award show instead?
Yeah, let's just skip to predictions for next week.
Let's look over the North American bracket because shit did not go down how anybody expected with this. Starting with the San Francisco Shock actually securing the #1 seed over the Fusion. In this match here, I think every analyst, with the exception of, I think Harsha was like one of the only people that I know of that predicted the Shock to win this match.
Yeah, everybody took Philly.
Harsha also said that he hadn't really been watching the matches recently. He just thought Shock were an overall better team, which makes sense. Like after the week break, if you think a team is just straight up better, they're going to use the week more effectively and become better. But even so, I mean, this was still surprising. I mean, honestly, considering how Philly performed later on in the tournament as well, Philly looked so good, but they couldn't quite match the Shock in this match.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Like, you look at Philly's run, like the rest of the way, right? Like after that, like they're. I mean, the whole playoffs for Philly, they were dominant, right? The Shock, we've seen them up and down a little bit. This one, though, the Shock just looked really good. Like,
I think it comes down to Philly not winning the first map because the halftime adjustment from the Shock was huge to play much more of the Zen Mercy and the long range poke kind of compositions that work really well on both Sky and Gibraltar anyway. So it made a lot of sense. It was super powerful. And to be honest, if you're the Shock, that's the one place you have looked better than Philly is playing these long range compositions where Violet just throws out damage and Ants is a beast. But on Li Jiang, it felt like Philly should have won. And Philly, I think they went up something like 99-0 on round one and ended up losing it 99-100. I might have been wrong with the exact numbers there, but it was something like that. And then they won the next round fairly comfortably. And again, it's like a 99-100 on the third map. And because they were playing a lot more brawly kind of comps, I really thought Philly were going to win that first engagement. It looked to be playing the better Overwatch, but Shock was so clutch.
I mean, it was so back and forth with the EMP cancellations and everything. Like, it literally
right there.
Either way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was both ways as well. You know, it wasn't like Hisu was strictly dominating Ans, and both Sombras essentially EMP'd at the same time, almost every fight, especially on Gardens. It was nuts. So it could have really gone either way. But overall, it just felt. It's so typical of the Shock to just like overpower their opponents and just like. Is Shock the most individually skilled team in the league? Or are they more stacked than the Dragons?
I don't think so. I mean, when I think about the Shock, I don't actually think about individual skill that much.
Yeah.
What? I mean, well, for some players. But all right, bear with me here, Johnny. The Philadelphia Fusion and the Shanghai Dragons are like supposed to be real super teams. They've got players that played really well that were put together all on one team. The Shock's players, they were pretty good, but they've become incredibly good on the Shock. And I think the Shock's greatest asset is like their team coordination, their adjustments at halftime, the way that they all play around each other.
Yeah, halftime's really good.
I mean, like pound for pound, Ants and Violet are incredible. You know, maybe Smurf is a little bit better.
Striker.
I mean, on these roles though, on Reaper, like I don't know. I don't think the individual skill makes that much difference. But yes, obviously they are incredibly stacked.
Yeah, I think what kind of separates the Shock is kind of what Josh was alluding to. Like, could you say that Philly or Shanghai has a stronger team in terms of like individual player skill? Like, yeah, but like Shock takes the high skill of like, you know, at worst like the third in terms of individual skill, and combines it with like the best teamwork, right? Like, that's what makes them strong. I don't think it's like the individual just kind of like carry games out of one or two players, right?
I mean, if anything, Carpe maybe had a better game than Ants when it came to the when he got subbed in for Gibraltar, and they still lost that one pretty handedly, honestly.
Yeah. What I was gonna say is like, you know, it was great adjustments from the Shock, like you said at halftime, Josh. Philly didn't make adjustments, and then I almost was gonna like even think about like what I was gonna say later about Philly is that they made great adjustments. So I think this was just a really odd game from Philly in terms of they probably thought like the mirror were just kind of playing close to it was gonna be good enough, and it obviously wasn't. They pretty much ran exactly what they ran the last time when they 3-0'd them. They didn't really make any adjustments off of that.
Philly are very confident in. Sorry to interrupt, but Philly are very confident in their own abilities to adapt on the fly. I think as well as a team, like they're very confident in that. And but it kind of makes sense with hindsight, looking back at the series. Yeah, we all predicted Philly because they were looking so clean, and I think everyone was kind of of the opinion as well that the Shock were teetering a little bit. They were not as dominant as they had been before. Maybe they weren't as fired up to win the playoffs because they've already got that championship win. You know, as much as they might be saying, you know, oh, we're just as dedicated or just as committed as trying to win. If it's
necessarily motivation, just like composition sometimes has been a bit whack, and I think that's justified.
I think that sometimes the point I was going to make. Sorry if I just get this out.
No, finish your point.
The point I was going to make was that as much as they might tell themselves as well, they're completely motivated and committed into, you know, taking it seriously and trying to become a repeated champion. Getting that win beforehand, I imagine that does even subconsciously just kind of eat away at a bit of that motivation to get that. If you've already got the win in your head, you know, it's every Overwatch player plays with the goal of being a champion, and they already achieved that last year. So I think it's definitely looked a little bit hands off. You know what I mean? At some points during the season compared to last season for the Shock. So I was kind of the opinion that, okay, I think they're still a good team, but it seems like they don't have that extra bit of gas necessary to get over the finish line compared to teams like Philly that have everything to play for. But that just wasn't the case in the series. A week to prep, they looked very clean, very, very well read when it comes to what they thought that Philly were going to be playing.
Well, the Shock, I think in this game, so Philly obviously is very hungry to try and get like a number one seed, a win, right, in general. I think, though, the Shock probably felt like they had much more to play for in the series because they had just had a close game with the Justice and probably didn't want to try that again.
Yeah.
I think also they come off the back of the loss in the regular season to Philly, where they were they were the favorites as well.
Because speaking to teams and players, they didn't really kind of understand how strong like Washington's composition was until they played against it. And then they were like, oh, shit, that was really good. So there was probably a little bit of extra pressure from San Francisco, like they knew that Washington was going to make it out and did not want to have that rematch again because they're very close to losing to Washington. I mean, Washington goes up 2-0, they have to reverse sweep in tremendous fashion. Where Philly probably is like, well, whatever, it's the justice, we'll adapt, like we'll be fine. Where a lot of other teams, after having lost to Washington and then even played against Washington, was like, that is not something to mess around with.
Yeah,
I don't know if it necessarily comes down to just player motivation like this, though. Like, you can't just make like these dash statements on like how motivated the players are going into a match. Like, I think the both teams really wanted to win this matchup, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to just be like, these guys were probably motivated, these guys weren't. That's how it ended up like
I don't think anyone said that they weren't motivated. Obviously, both teams want to win the match. I think we just kind of said that one team probably had a little bit of extra motivation than the other.
When we look at the actual games themselves, the second half speaks very interestingly about the styles, in my opinion, because once the Shock made this adaptation to play more of the Violet Zen and Striker Tracer and that kind of stuff, Philly were a little slow to be able to pick up on it.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, the thing is as well that doesn't tell the entirety of the story too, because on Volskaya, Shock played the mirror of the Sombra Reaper and they capped with 3.5 minutes on the time bank. So the Shock were just able to execute a comp by virtue of basically that EMP that you just saw right there, and then they snowballed it into point B. But then when it came to the defense, and this was also true on Gibraltar, Shock just manhandled the defense against Philadelphia, because pushing into Shock when they have Striker on the Tracer, and Philly don't really have somebody to match Striker on the Tracer, because if you want to put Carpe in there, then Jesus on the Ash, and then Jesus versus Ants. So I kind of see what you mean, Johnny, when you're talking about the team being stacked, because when it comes down to this like Tracer Ash gameplay, I mean, who the hell is going to be able to go up against Ants and Striker when it comes to Tracer Ash? This is an outrageous duo to go up against for any of the top 4 teams.
And I think that Shock probably I'm not gonna use the word best anymore, but the insane tactical adaptation from the mid-series, and this is what happened against the Justice 2. Sure, it was just put Striker on Tracer, essentially, and it was the same here against the Fusion when they did start playing the Ash and Tracer. But like, this team just screams so much like high IQ, like high Overwatch IQ. Like, they just know how to calmly and collected just adapt to the moment and to the series and just get across the finish line. When I look at the Philadelphia Fusion, and I'm like, yeah, they have a great strategy, especially the game plans against the Justice, which we'll talk about later, just like blew my mind away. Like, they came into that match so incredibly prepared. Yeah, and this is what we've seen from the Fusion so many times. They have a great understanding of like compositions and how to use them in matchups, etc. But I feel like Fusion doesn't make these super clutch last minute tactical adaptations. And in the past, it's just like, hey, let's bet on Carpe. Like, I know it's not said like that in like the prep room, in like the strats, just like, let's pray Carpe pops off. But he saved them so many times, and they don't have that final oomph that the Shock has, in my opinion.
I think they absolutely have, though.
Yeah, they have.
Do you think back to their match against the Gladiators when they were on the cusp of getting 3-0'd, and they ended up reverse sweeping them by mirroring them in a Sombra comp that they hadn't played at all?
Yeah, I think Philly actually do that fairly often, but they don't. I don't know whether they do it in the big games very much.
Yeah. I mean,
whereas the Shock have so much playoff experience, they are so happy to just adapt on the fly against anybody.
Right, like look at all the stuff that Philly kind of 24 hours to play Washington kind of came up with, right?
I mean, you guys want to move over.
That's not the same thing, though. We can separate tactics and strategy, and I'm complimenting their strategy and how prepped they were against Washington. But like when it's like map 3 and you're stuck on Volskaya for a little bit, like you have to make some kind of like shot call adjustment on the fly to like handle what the Shock are doing.
So you're saying their mid-game adjustments aren't good?
Of course they're good. I mean, they're a top 2 team in NA, but I feel like Shock has more oomph in that regard. Yeah. Like they really know how to get the job done.
I would agree with that.
Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes in these final matchups, that is what makes the difference for Fusion, in my opinion.
When it's a lot to play for.
Cup 2.
Right? When there's a lot to play for in the playoff scenarios, a little bit, because Shock has the experience of being in multiple playoffs. This is something that Super was saying, actually, in the piece when he was recorded. I can't remember what the piece was about, but I distinctly remember they asked Super a question.
It was like, why is your team going to win the grand finals? I think that's what they said.
And he said that we have been in almost every playoff since like 2019, we have way more experience compared to any other team when it comes to those playoff scenarios.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
It's unreal, isn't it?
I think they've been to every grand final of every title other than the Summer Showdown where it was Philly Paris. That's the first one that they missed under Krusty since like stage 4 2019, something like that.
It's wild.
No,
we can
stage 4
also
2018.
We can move on as well now to talk about Philly versus Washington because we've already kind of drifted into that just by the nature of talking about that. I'll just start us off by saying as well, just cementing again, what an insane performance from Philly to just make Washington's comp look absolute doo-doo with 12 hours to prep.
So sick.
No BS. Who thought that Philly was going to win this match?
I thought it was going to be super close. I really thought this was a dangerous trap game for Philly.
Yeah, I thought it was as well. I was not feeling great about it.
I think I said on the last Plat chat that if Philly lost to the Shock, I thought they were probably going to lose to the Justice. Because if you lose to the Shock, you haven't had the time to be able to prep against the Justice, probably. Because I'd love to talk to Christopher and KDG to actually get, have a longer conversation about how they use that off week, but I assume that you use the off week to prep for the Shock. You don't use.
They almost look more. I was going to say they almost look more prepared for the Justice than they did for
Which makes sense though, right? Because the Justice only play one comp, so in theory you can prep for the Justice really hard because they only play one comp, one style, whereas the Shock play multiple. But they made them look trash, and we know the Justice aren't trash.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I think when we get to grand finals, you're going to see Philly play a lot of different stuff, a lot of kind of even Roadhog looks like we saw them play during the series.
So I think every team needs to play Hog.
All teams are going to play Hog in some kind of Hog Sigma,
you're
Hog
gonna
Zarya.
I think this
Hog is going to be the meta. I think
this kind of these opening weeks of the playoffs were where teams discovered, okay, what metas can be played, or what compositions could be played. But what you get down to when you have a lot more time is finding out, okay, where are they most effective, and where can you run them at where they're at best, at maximum efficiency. That's what you're going to start to see probably when we get into the Final Four.
My grand finals bracket is actually intact with the correct seedings. And I
really?
think
no way. Really? Oh yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Seoul.
Oh yeah.
So I predicted the Fusion to lose 2 straight and just go out, and Shock to lose against Seoul and then do a lower bracket run to the finals.
We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this
a month
later.
ago, by the way.
Yeah.
But
we'll talk about. I want to talk about the. This is a discussion for a later point, basically. We're keeping it onto the idea of Washington.
For Philadelphia, I mean, they start out, so they counted the comp in 2 different ways, which is the most impressive thing to me, because they start out by playing Sombra Reaper, and they showcased that. Right, a lot of people started thinking we were broken records when we were saying Sombra Reaper can be a counter, but you have to play it perfectly. And they're like, if you have to play it perfectly, shut the fuck up. Like, this is not a counter. You can't run this comp if you have to play it like you are gods in order to win. But Philly did. Yeah, Philly are just god tier. And it's like, okay, you can get countered by a hook or by a headshot, but if you play this fast and this perfect with your aggression and your coordination and your focus fire, you win.
As soon as they saw Aim God and he was a little bit further away from the Hog, he was fucking dead.
Yeah.
I mean, he was dead in seconds.
Didn't Janu have something like 27 deaths over the first?
It was insane.
2
he was
maps
first death in so many scenarios.
So what I noticed when I was watching it, I've casted a ton of the Justice games, just like being whatever the schedule was. When teams would kill Janu, they would either back out, like back away, and like give Arc that res for free, or like they would just take so much damage from everybody else. What I noticed what they did, especially on Li Jiang, as soon as they would get Janu, they pretty much knew Arc was just going to fly in to try and get the res, because you're creating effectively 1,800, 2,000 HP if you get the res. And Sato would almost always kill him. Every time they would go for a res, like on Janu, they punished them really well, which, I thought Philly was just tremendous in this series, where, this is why I think Philly is still a scary team when we get to the Final Four, because I think that they can adjust their composition without adjusting the players that much.
Sure.
Some other teams have to make varying subs to be able to do that in a short amount of time.
Easily the best Sombra Reaper team. I didn't think I'd be saying this because Shanghai have just looked the best team in the world at playing Sombra comps the entire season long. But these Sombra comps play so differently to the others. The Philadelphia Fusion are definitely the best Sombra Reaper team right now. That might change once we get to the Final Four because there's still a month left. Yeah. But right now, Philly are better than any team if they end up playing this mirror. I know that they lost the mirror at some points to the Shock, but they're just... the default way that they play over time, if you played that enough, I think Philly would win because their Sombra Reaper is just so good. They're so coordinated.
Very cool to watch. Yeah, they're very, very, very clean. Philly, they're just looking so clean. I would hate to be a Philly fan because the feelings you must be going through right now. Yeah, I mean, this is the time, right? Because you've been looking for a tournament win for the longest time, and honestly, Philly have never looked better than they do currently in this moment, and they're in the Final Four. It's all coming down to this. These next 4 weeks must be so anxiety-inducing if you're a Philly fan.
Yeah.
It's almost time for the others to catch up.
When they brought out that double sniper composition on King's Row, I was just like, of course. Like, what? It speaks. I can't find my words. Like when you see a composition come out like that, and you just get like an epiphany, and you're like, "Oh, this is so obvious."
Just makes sense.
Like, why not? Like, of course, they would run double sniper on King's Row A, and then have a Sigma push around the high ground with a barrier. Like because he has his own barrier, and they can also spam. Like it makes so much sense. Like why didn't everyone do this?
They played the Hanzo. I was like,
this is obviously the best comp. Yeah, but just like those moments are just so. Those moments are just so sick. Like when you can see like the preparation come into play. Everyone knows their position. Everyone knows the composition, how it plays, what they're going to do, and they just executed it flawlessly. Snowballed like even on the second or third point, and like it was beautiful to watch. Like that's sick Overwatch to me. I love it.
The only thing that may burn them, I think Josh was kind of alluding to earlier, is like the ability to play Ashe Tracer with Carpe in the game in some capacity. And I don't know whether Hisu plays Tracer or Carpe you kind of figure out a way for. I mean, who else? You would obviously probably want Carpe and Ivy in an ideal world, right? If you didn't switch off of it.
I mean, I don't think so. I think you'd want to run Carpe Hisu. Like Hisu's.
Is Hisu a better Tracer than Ivy?
Yeah, I mean, he should be. I don't know whether he is, but I think he should be. I would even be tempted to run Hisu on the Ashe and Carpe on the Tracer, but I'm not. Really? I feel like the Ashe is more important, so maybe keep Carpe on that. Maybe you can run with like a bit of a passive Tracer that's just designed to keep the other Tracer in check. I'm not really sure. I feel like they are a little lacking in that role.
Yes.
This was a really cool turning point in the series, though, Johnny, like you were saying, because immediately you realize. Oh, well, this is already in the second half where Washington were forced to adapt. But Washington, normally, they just can't. They only play the Hog Zarya. So when the APAC teams pull out this comp with the Hog and the Sigma, people counter it by going Ball or by going... The NYXL was even playing some Genji if people were running double sniper on defense.
NYXL was playing?
And
when did that match happen?
And then Hog D.Va as well. But the Justice can't run any of those kind of slight alterations to their composition because they have a massively inflexible tank line.
Yeah. So my worry is that once we get to the Final Four, I don't know if teams will allow Philadelphia Fusion to play the Sombra Reaper fully. Obviously, you can force it on some maps. It's map dependent, whatever. Nice little cats on the podcast. Love to see it. But I could totally see teams finding a strategic way to force Philly to play Ashe Tracer in some capacity and then winning that head-to-head duel. Because I think among the 4 teams remaining, I mean, Fusion might be better than Seoul in that regard. I think still Profit and Fitz has been really good. But I could see how teams would look to expose Fusion's strategy here. Because I think that Ashe Tracer could be an incredibly important default composition to lean back on. That you have to as a staple pillar composition that teams have to respect. Because otherwise they'll try to force that in some capacity. That's where I'm worried a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that Philly has to maybe compensate for their lack of incredible DPS talent there by playing more of the Hog Zarya version of it, or Hog something version of it. Because if you try and win the tank battle instead and free up a bit more space for the rest of your DPS to make work there. I think that could be an option for them, especially if you're trying to run, Shadow Hog and Fury on whatever off tank he wants to be able to support. That is a pretty good look, especially, there aren't any other teams in this top 4 that have specialists on those roles. We're talking about, Gesture Hog, which is good, but it's not like, it's not something unbelievable, like Decay was unbelievably good on the Zarya. We're not talking about some freak beasts that they're going up against. Like Shadow Fury can hang with any of the other top 4 when it comes to the Hog comps.
Do you think they'll try and play maybe Carpe on the Reaper some and play like Reaper Sombra with Carpe Hisu, and then you could switch off of that, right?
You could maybe. I just think Hisu and Ivy has shown like great expertise now. I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah.
Well, I will give them more variation, and I don't know how. Like, is the skill difference between Carpe and Ivy on the Reaper that?
I'm not convinced you need flexibility.
It's more like play style, right?
I'm not really convinced you need flexibility. A lot of what we've seen is like different comps for certain maps. Right. But outside of that one Shock Philly game on Volskaya, where they played the Sombra Reaper at the beginning, and then they swapped over to playing the long range stuff, the Tracer and the Zen. Outside of that, it seems like the default for Volskaya is Tracer Ash Zen compositions, and the default for Gibraltar is Tracer Ash Zen compositions, but the default for Control is Reaper Sombra or Hog comps. Right. And Havana, you can play some double sniper. It seems like there aren't very many maps where you would want to swap between the Sombra Reaper and the Tracer Ash. So I think Philly can just tactically sub people based on the map.
Yeah.
I will also say, I think among the 4 teams, maybe Seoul, I think Fusion, I trust the most with coming up with unique strategies and like prep beforehand to like throw wonky stuff at their opponents. I have a great faith in their coaching staff to come up with like great prepared strategies ahead of time that could perhaps give them an advantage. Whereas I could see the other teams perhaps relying a bit more on what they do best. I mean, that's purely speculation, and you guys can't really say anything about it because it's just speculation, but I feel that way anyway. So maybe we'll see Fusion at least have a lot of stuff prepared for the matches.
I think it all just kind of comes down to which region do you feel like needs to make more adjustments going into Grand Finals week in terms of what they play and how they want to play it.
Let's shift the discussion because I think we're diving into APAC territory a little bit here, and I want to leave that for when we're actually diving in.
One more point. Sorry, Bren, just now that we're watching Volskaya, for anyone that didn't watch this game live, you should still go back and watch it, because even though it was a 3-0 and the Philadelphia Fusion won, this was the only map that was a roll, Volskaya, and it was kind of because the Justice realized the writing was on the wall and they had to swap the roles between Decay and Janu. But the previous 2 maps were close. Like, there were moments that the Justice would have been able to win the first 2 maps. And so even though Philadelphia Fusion were clearly the better team over the course of the entire series, it wasn't until Volskaya where they really just rolled them on a map. And I think that the Justice fans should still be very pleased with how their team performed, even against a team that was hard, knew exactly what they were running and had the answers. Even when they had all the answers to beat the Justice still went down swinging.
Bren was so happy when this happened. I loved all the memes that came out of it.
Let's talk about Washington then and their sort of stuff, because that's what I've been kind of wanting to drift over to. The Washington... Oh my God, the cat just went for my fingers.
Whose hat is that?
Let's talk about it, because the Justice, yes, I wanted them to lose in a memey way because I felt like they had kind of knocked out all the other organic storylines that we'd built up over the year, and this was like the result of a rule bend. Yeah. I don't take the blame out on the org for abusing the rule, because listen, you take every advantage you can get. I don't take it out on the players at all. It's just kind of sucked to see that. And the more I saw the Washington Justice get beaten down, the less I wanted to see them lose. I wanted a close series. You know what I mean? I wanted their final match to be a close series. I wanted them to actually have a good show of it, but Philly just did not give them even an in. But, I mean, we've got this title as Washington's controversial playoff run. It was definitely controversial because... Mate, I'll tell you now, I was getting... I made that meme post of me listening to... the sound of silence while screaming when Florida lost to Washington. Yeah. And I posted it on Twitter. And I only have on my tweet deck setup, I literally only see my tweets and I see the notifications from people I follow. Because it's like that's just an easy way to just filter out just the noise that normally brings negativity from social media while still allowing me to post on social media. And the GM of Washington liked all of the responses from salty Justice fans. So they all showed up in my notifications. They all showed up. The Justice fans, like, saying how unprofessional it was, that the league talent was so against Justice and all the rest of it. Of course we're going to be fucking against you. I mean, this is literally, like, the most artificial storyline. Like, Justice were the villains in this playoffs. They were knocking out all these teams that have been working hard all season long.
So I don't have an issue with the rule. I don't even have an issue with them picking up Decay. I think just the way the patch and the meta flipped everything is what allowed it to happen. Right?
I mean, it was the perfect storm. Like it was the playoff patch came through that allowed them to play this weird comp. They had a player from Europe that they were never going to field anyway, Lulsish, that they could replace with the rules so that they could bend the rule into their favor. They ended up doing that, so they got Decay. Decay had to have fallen out of his team for that to even be a possibility in the first place. It's the perfect storm. And
2 weeks.
And they found a comp where everybody could play their best roles. Yeah. And Tuber and Stitch fucking installed cheats on their mouse or something. I don't know what they did. Like they just elevated their gameplay.
Yeah, 2 weeks before the playoffs, if you went to the Washington Justice and said, "Hey, write you a script that gets you to third," how does that happen?
They wouldn't be able to do it.
They couldn't even come up with something like this. That like, there'd be this massive balance patch that like Roadhog is now the go-to main tank, and you can play him with Zarya. And speaking to, because I was curious of why teams didn't come out and try and like mirror them earlier, and I guess it just kind of came down to that everybody hedged their bets on other types of comps. Washington probably wasn't scrimming anybody that good because you're not going to waste your time scrimming the 12 seed if you're one of the better teams in NA. Washington was just beating up on everybody with this comp. Nobody knew about it. And then teams did not want to waste practice time trying to counter it or learn it when they had already invested so much time into other things. So I think if you're a Justice fan, you have a lot to look forward to, right? I think if you get like maybe an upgrade in the main tank role, I think you probably have some like additions in terms of support.
The worst thing, though,
wait a fucking second.
The worst thing to come out of this is that they rest on their laurels and think, 1 or 2 upgrades and we're fine for next year.
Oh, they run it back, bro. No way, bro. You are gonna get 12th again.
This happened last year, man. They went on that run in stage 4, and they were like, it would be all right. If they try and do that shit again.
2018 too.
You need a self-awareness here. Come on, guys. Don't be.
But I don't know whether it's very hard to have that level of self-awareness within the system. This is a very common human thing, is that because from their point of view, they worked really hard to get this, right? And they feel like they put in extra effort when Decay was signed, all of this shit came together, and by virtue of their own hard work, they have managed to put together this run. It's very difficult to analyze when you're experiencing luck, the percentage factor that luck has to do with anything. Like, it's hard for any of us to be able to factor in how much luck happened for us to be casters for the Overwatch League, for example.
Sure.
Like, if you asked any of us, we'd be like, yeah, well, this is what I did. I worked hard here. I spoke to this person here. Like, I networked up my way this way. Like, you wouldn't say that the like external factors were the main reason.
So I think tea leaves all lined up, bro, and you just
but that's it's hard when you've experienced the luck to be able to attribute a large portion of it to that factor.
This one is so obvious. This one's so obvious.
It's obvious to us on the outside.
They've been molding about War for like over half a year, and now they let him be like assistant coach while this matter is going on. And then you also just like have Arc popping off on Mercy again, and you're like, well, Arc's popping off on Mercy. We can probably deal with his Lucio too. It's like it would be next level ignorance for them to just like completely ignore what they've done for 8 months now.
You say this, Johnny, next level ignorance, but like the reaction from the staff at the Washington Justice and the players themselves, they are fully in belief. And trust me, it goes both ways. They had to work very hard, obviously, to get to the point that they were at. A lot of people were writing off this comment. They were like, oh, it looks like my gold games. I'm like, your gold games do not look like this. This is a well-oiled machine that is perfectly executing a specific comp that no one can really stand up to. The Washington Justice looked good. They were easily a top 4 team when they were playing in the playoffs. But from the staff, I am worried about this attitude, this pervasive attitude of like, it was all us that got us to this point. You know, yes, we took advantage of this, that, or the other. Attitude? I think given the extreme whiplash backlash that the Washington Justice staff like went to, the fact that they were like subtweet liking a bunch of the fucking molding fans at me.
Look,
that's the kind of impression I'm getting.
They're happy that their team is successful for the first time in 2 years. They've spent millions of dollars buying into the league. They've been absolute shite. And for the first time, people enjoy talking about this team. They're probably over the moon. They're like, someone cares. Someone cares at last. And here we are.
They didn't break any rule to do it. They just got super lucky at every possible point you could get lucky. And like, not even get lucky and like, oh, you know, it worked out like in our favor. Like, no, they got lucky to the point where like it worked out badly for everybody but them. Like that's how like that's how lucky they got consistently.
Here's Albert
Here's mayhem molding.
Yeah. I mean, after he's cooled down, simmered down a little bit after being knocked out by the Washington rule breakers, as I put it. And he's wrote a couple of these essays up here saying like he doesn't blame the team, reasonable. He thinks that the team played very well, reasonable. I think he places the issue with the league itself.
With the sub rule and the playoff format that
right,
you know, the emergency sub rule. But here's the thing, like it's very easy to say, oh, the teams are, because I think Albert's is a very normal reaction. You don't want to blame people, you want to blame systems. But the issue is that in this instance, I don't think the system worked in a bad way. For example, Albert says that the emergency sub signing was in the event someone couldn't travel to the Final Four. That's the way that I read it. I believe that's the way that the rule was intended as well. But you can't announce the rule once the Final Four has been selected, because then you only have a month. Like the logistics required to get people over to Korea require much more than a month's notice to implement a rule like this.
And I saw somebody say like, well, why couldn't they sign a sub but not use him?
You only use him if he gets to the Final Four, something like that.
But that does not make any sense, because let's say, for argument's sake, the Paris Eternal Ben Best was ineligible to travel, right? They sign a main tank who plays Reinhardt, right? Should they then be penalized of not being able to make the substitutions they made all season long between No Smite and Ben Best because Ben Best can't travel and now they have a new guy? Like, I wouldn't penalize them for that. No, they should be able to make the substitutions they've made all year long.
By the way, people always bring up like Ben Best, Paris, like these Western players. It's also if players refuse to travel for very valid health reasons.
Yeah.
You don't know which, like even Korean players might have some health issue where they don't want to be going to airports right now in case they catch COVID. That's a very real scenario that could have happened. And by the way, would have been really reasonable for the player to say that, because shit's weird out there.
So to penalize the rest of the team and put more emphasis like on the player, like you'd kind of like make the player like a scapegoat for everybody, right? And then not being able to play the new player doesn't make any sense. So I mean,
I think sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, I mean, it's such the opposite of a perfect storm that it's like, it's to me personally, it's not worth like getting upset about. I completely understand the teams, the organizations, the players who feel this frustration with the situation at hand. But it's literally like COVID made this sort of happen. And then we also had a big meta shift. And it just happened to be all of the comfort heroes of the Washington Justice. Like it won't repeat again. Let me finish, Matt. And then as well, you have the fact that the only real thing you could change moving forward would be the meta issue. Because this has happened. That's the only thing I think you can reasonably complain about, is how we have big major patch changes before playoffs. It has happened ever since 2016.
And we've molded about it since 2016.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can also understand where the developers are coming from. Like, hey, you know, we've had this, you know, meta now for about 6 months, and, you know, we want to change it up. It's the playoffs. You know, I kind of understand that, but
It just so happened that this one was a Roadhog Zarya composition. Like, how can you know, it's unfortunate, but I can understand where players and organizations come from. I think if you want to be upset about anything, it is the meta shifts before big playoffs like this.
You know what would have not allowed this to happen? Hero pools or hero bans. This would not have been a thing.
What do you mean? Hero pools would have? Because fuck knows what hero pools would have got.
No, I don't want to talk about hero pools ever again.
If you had hero bans or hero pools,
no, I don't want to talk about this. I don't.
You would.
No, I'm so fed up.
If there was any argument for hero bans, this would be it. This would not have been able to be a thing.
Yeah.
If each team was allowed to, let's say, ban a hero or whatnot, and you kind of took the same thing as hero pools, this could not have occurred. As soon as teams saw Decay in the main tank role, they would have just banned like Roadhog or banned like Zarya.
Is that a good thing though? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I am in favor of this hero bans argument. A lot of people have talked about it in the past before. I think it's strategic. It's great. It's a good way of making things fresh. But the counter argument is always, and I think it's very valid in this situation as well, is that hero bans like that stop cool things from happening too. Yes, like this run was cool. Like this run. Yeah. It was scary at the time. It was weird. I was not a fan if the Justice had actually knocked out one of the top teams and then just been hard countered in the final four. That would have been just such a bad end to the season, like so terrible. But the run that we actually got with inarguably the best two teams making it to North America and Justice going on this crazy Cinderella run and making it to third place, that was cool shit. And hero bans would have fixed it, but also fixed it in the same way that you fix a cap by never letting them ever.
Can you imagine the amount of Sombra Reaper we would have watched? We would have watched so much Sombra Reaper if it wasn't for the Washington Justice. Yeah. So in many ways, they were also sort of like not the like if the antagonist was the Sombra Reaper, the Washington Justice were actually like saving the playoffs by running something different than Sombra Reaper, because that brawl comp, man, like I can only watch like 2 hours of it a day, otherwise my brain just like turns off.
Everybody I know who's like outside of like the Overwatch kind of bubble, they actually were super excited and loved watching the Justice games because you didn't get two teams playing the same exact things just running at each other. I was a fan of it. I would have felt bad if they beat Philly, but I also at that point if they beat Philly, I'm like, okay, I want to see how far they can take it. I think the argument is for other teams that end up losing is we did see Philly beat it, although they had some time to come up with counters and play it well.
Not that much time, though.
Not that much time. And we saw the Shock beat it when nobody had any time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be your argument, like, against, like, oh, well, we kind of feel slighted. Like, well, we did see, like, other teams beat it without mirroring it. They played what they kind of do play. I mean, the Shock played some... Zen, and then you also had Philly kind of play some Roadhog style comps, but they were able to defeat it. It wasn't like it was something that was unbeatable. I think it's just very odd that a team that finishes like everything about it's odd.
I mean, it was also incredibly controversial. Go on, Johnny.
I just wanted to say, like, we all know that Mexican Coke is superior, but corn syrup wasn't so bad this time around. So, you know, we just gotta deal with it.
That is a very weird analogy. Are you saying the Washington Justice causes diabetes?
Well, no, I wasn't speaking about the medical consequences. I was speaking about the organic source of the actual sweetener within the drink.
Okay, very meta, very meta.
Well, now I have to explain the joke, so I mean, I
quite like that. It went over my head as well, but thank you for explaining.
This run was even more controversial, though, because not only did they sign somebody that was... it was like a bending of a rule to a lot of people's mind, but the player that they signed was also controversial as well. So now you've got like Crimzo and Doha tweeting, a big back and forth, not tweeting at each other either, but like Crimzo's been tweeting a bunch in the last week about his first tweet was, he provided some follow-up tweets that went under the radar, which is why I bring it up now, because his original tweet got like 6K likes. People loved it. It was so juicy. Losing to the person that held your team hostage for months in scrims because he was unhappy really hits different. And it's like, wow, like just unleashing the fucking drama.
And even better, Decay played into it. He played into it as well, where like we had those comments where like an interview asked like, do you care like about your backline and stuff? And it's like, no, I let them die.
Well, no, I don't think that was a literal translation, was it?
Oh,
I think Adam Chen was making a joke there.
It was a joke. Here I was expecting formal, factual translation, and it was a joke.
Yeah,
oh well,
that was a joke.
oh no,
but yeah,
it would have been so good.
Crimzo followed up though. Crimzo followed up by saying, because Doha tweeted something like, Decay was not in the wrong, yada yada, and obviously the whole reason that Decay was holding the team hostage is unknown and is unknowable unless you were not just inside the team, but like probably a Korean player or a Korean member of staff inside the team as well, because it's got to be something to do with that kind of aspect of it. And so Crimzo followed up by saying most situations are not as black and white as people think. There's multiple sides to a story, etc., etc. It's been incredibly stressful for myself, and I'm sure it has been for others as well. And he's saying that basically he believes that Decay was acting this is his quote, completely disrespectfully and selfishly in his eyes, but that he doesn't know what happened behind the scenes to cause that issue. So he believes that like the way that Decay reacted was really disrespectful and selfish, like holding the team hostage, refusing to participate in scrims, soft throwing, this kind of shit. But he doesn't really know why like Decay felt that way. So it's hard to really measure up.
Sounds like Dallas Fuel, Josh. It sounds like Dallas Fuel got some internal communication problems between the Korean players and the Western players. That's weird.
Oh, that's crazy. That never happens.
That's never happened before, especially with Dallas. Dallas have normally been quite good.
Could you imagine just being on Dallas and like, Decay just shows up to the practice facilities in pajamas every day, loading up Fall Guys, like, F you guys, I'm just gonna hang out. And then he gets sent away, and you're like, oh man, thank God we got rid of that problem, whatever. And then you see him get picked up by the Justice. You're like, haha, he's on the Justice. That sucks for him. And then the Justice just get him on a run, playing Roadhog Zarya all the way through. Oh, man.
That is brutal.
I feel bad for the guys on DOS.
That is a very good point that you brought up, though, Josh, is that I think we need to... It's very easy for us as outside spectators looking in, even as much as we have some... internal information and whatnot, but the people looking outside in as well, to not jump to these radical conclusions based on it. It's always a little bit gray. It's not just black, it's not just white. There's always multiple sides to a story, and you got to consider every single faculty of it. It's like with this entire conversation topic, what we've talked about, like we can blame the system for the Washington being able to go on this run, or you can look on the sides that this system needed to be in place. Otherwise, honestly, the season would have been kind of whack because COVID kind of fucked everything up. Like everything happens for a reason. Positives and negatives to everything,
I mean,
God, you zen motherfucker.
This is also like why I mauled it out on Twitter about predictions, like the last day off. It's like there's always, context and a gray area to explain a thing or two. Because that Reddit post was up about everyone predicting the Fusion against the Shock. And like,
there was a Reddit post.
It was a post on Reddit where they were literally like moments before disaster, because literally almost every analyst in Overwatch predicted the Fusion over Shock. Yeah. And so, there was this funny joke. It's like, hey, everyone predicted the Fusion, but, the Shock ended up winning. But then, mistake of my life, started digging in the comments in Reddit. No. And it's literally like, the Fusion, should have never been favored in the first place. It was so obvious that Shock was always the better team.
People are just dumb.
And it's like, and it was just like, oh, well, like they always talk shit about the Shock. They have too much expectation of the Shock. They're always supposed to be this, giant, supposed to 3-0 opponents all the time. And it's like, no, dude, like if you watch the fucking Plat chat episode, you would see that we clearly said that it was like a 55-45 matchup, and everyone just ever so slightly predicted the Fusion over the Shock. And we actually gave credit to the Shock, and we're like, nope, this graphic is misrepresenting. Actually, this is way closer than it actually shows in the graphic. And
you're expecting people to not jump to conclusions. Like the part of the reason why I stopped reading these comments as well is because people have ulterior motives when they're making these comments, Johnny. Like most of the people who make these comments are just jealous, right? They're looking in from this position. They're armchair analysts. They want to be in a position that we're in right now.
Every
voices
team
of
in the
reason.
Overwatch League thinks that they are like the enemy. They think that they're like the special team that everyone riles against. No, you're all the same.
Well, this is why
you just care about your team.
You have to create your minds like me and Josh, just steel fortresses that can't be penetrated.
I used to think my mind was a steel fortress, but even steel erodes in time.
Well, just fucking add more steel to it. I don't know.
Add more steel to it.
Build it back up.
Fucking order some WD-40, you dumb cunt.
Yeah. Just what do? You weld it, right? You just weld it back together. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Sure. Makes sense.
People. Sorry, I have them all.
No, that's fine. They love to be right after the fact.
Of course,
right?
anyone fucking hindsight can make a claim like, oh, well, they should have been favored. Well, no, actually, fucking Billy Basketball 1998.
Billy Basketball.
This is not the case, bro. Hindsight, anybody can fucking say that. But in the moment, Philly looked like the better team, bro.
Yeah.
Like, you've actually, for osmosis, I am annoyed now.
Philly had just 3-0'd them. They were 3-0ing everybody on their side of the bracket.
And they looked clean.
The Justice had just taken the shock to game 5.
Yes.
They had looked super clean. Who would you have taken, general population out there? I would love for somebody to be like, oh yeah, the shock. Well, why? Oh, because they're better. Oh, well, what happened? But they just lost some running these compositions. Why do you think they're better? Oh, I think they're just better. Like, that's
really cool.
We hate the San Francisco Shock.
Yeah.
Fuck the San Francisco Shock for some reason.
Talking about this like idea as well and relating it back to Washington. The Washington Valiant game was one of the first really interesting games this week, and it was so funny to see people in the first map when the Valiant destroyed the Justice. Do you remember that first map on Busan? Yeah. Load of people just started tweeting like, I knew this would happen so easy. This can't happen. Give it a week and it'll get slaughtered. And then the Justice come back in the series as soon as they swap over to the Zen themselves. And it's just so hard for Dreamer to do anything on Winston. Yeah. And suddenly all of these tweets dry up as they just see the match go the other way. I think it was Kick Tripod from the Tactical Crouch podcast that said, the first map of Control is not important unless it's the team I want to win, and then it's a very important first map win. Yeah. And I just thought that was such a great way of how everybody thinks about the series. If it's the team you want to win, you think that first map, you're like, oh man, what a great start for this series. And if it's the team you want to win that loses, you're like, no, just shake it off. It's fine. Mid-map adaptation's easy. Just go next.
Yeah. What you got to think about. All right, let's shift the conversation again then, because I want to talk now. I'm trying to think, do we want to talk about this now or after we've discussed APAC? Because I feel like it would be good to discuss. So the topic is, how confident are we in the North American teams? I'm thinking, is this better once we've actually assessed the APAC region? And
I think so. We're going to compare them.
Because we're going to make comparisons, right? So let's review the APAC region, and then we can actually have the discussion points of both of them, and we can review both of them. So let's review APAC instead. And first of all, we're going to talk about Shanghai versus Seoul that happened. These matches in APAC were eye-opening for me, because it's the first time in a while that I've paid close attention to APAC, and I've still got my inherent biases from when I was casting a lot of APAC, and I knew for a while that APAC was probably weaker than North America, but I expected that the meta that we were in to really be good for APAC, and it wasn't. It was a little bit chaotic. It was a little bit scrappy. Bro. And this match in particular, I think, opened my eyes to the fact that I was like, I mean, APAC is not as strong as people are making out.
This match, if you are looking for hope as a North American Overwatch fan, watch this one and then watch New York versus Seoul, and you're like, you know what? We may have a chance. I don't know if you have a chance against Shanghai. I think Shanghai is still that good. But man, I mean, the APAC game seems all over the place in terms of just, like, it wasn't even like you saw bad play. It was just the coordination was just like, it was all over the place, man.
It's definitely off. I mean, you can... The thing is, as well, Bren, when you say about, like, people overrating the APAC teams, I think that people tend to miss a lot of the nuance in this discussion because the APAC teams, I think, have been ahead in various times throughout the year, but definitely not in the Summer Showdown. The NA teams, the top 3 NA teams playing the Genji were a lot better than the APAC teams at that time. And I think this is another instance where the top NA teams, the top 3 NA teams, seem to be ahead of everyone, maybe other than Shanghai. Because but the weird part about that is that I think Justice's comp would have been exposed much earlier in APAC because people were playing double sniper and playing the Hog Sigma kind of comps. But because that was never something that the NA teams had even experimented with, the 2 metas went in very different directions. But I think something that has done is that the NA teams' coordination with Sombra Reaper, and we say NA teams, I mean, mostly that's Philly, but you look a little bit further down as well at the Valiant and Mayhem, they were also pretty good with that comp, is significantly better than the APAC teams. I don't know whether that's going to have any effect in the actual overall meta that we end up playing in the Final 4, but the Shanghai tried to run Sombra Reaper against Seoul, and they just failed completely. The difference was night and day between watching Shanghai play it and Philly play it.
And I also wonder how to what quality Shanghai can play Hog compositions going forward.
They looked pretty good.
I think they did. I think I would expect the Shock to have some kind of look with it. Philly, I think Sato it can play the Hog at a pretty high level. Who was talking? I think it was you, Josh. You were talking to somebody, and they were saying that Sato has like a top 500 DPS or something like that.
Top 20 DPS.
Top 20 DPS.
Yeah, Sato's got a top 20 DPS account, and apparently when they did, the Philadelphia Fusion did a video where they did an aim labs test, and Carpe got like 87% in some flick aiming or something like that. That was the highest on the team, apart from Sato, who got 95% in it, which doesn't always translate, obviously.
Well, the flicking is,
it's not a bad start, though. It's not a
I
bad
use a lot of aim
start.
labs, and I can say sometimes you can get good RNG on a run, and you can get some unreal stuff. Like I was like the 72 in the world for tracking at some point on aim labs, which would tell you sometimes. But that was like a pure, very good RNG run because the various challenges that they run, sometimes they you just get easy ones where it will just be a huge ball that's slowly moving. You get multiple of those in a row, it's very easy to get high tracking. Same with flicking if you get a lot of group targets. Anyway, that's my point.
Also, I don't really think, this is going to probably be my hottest take of the show, but I don't necessarily think that we're going to see a ton of like Roadhog Zara compositions. I think that most of these teams are very comfortable either playing like Sombra Reaper, Ash Tracer, or just defaulting to double sniper or like Roadhog Sigma comps to counter it if they happen to run into it. So I don't necessarily think.
So you're saying specifically Roadhog Zarya?
Yeah, like the Washington comp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think. I think we'll see Shanghai try to counter it. Seoul obviously knows how to play that type of composition. Shock, well, I've studied up and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily think that teams will get away with playing like a Washington-esque composition in the top 4.
If the team that you're playing against isn't playing double sniper, if they're playing, for example, the Ash Tracer with the Winston Diva, you can play Ash Tracer with a Hog Zarya or a Hog Diva, and it's wild. Like, it's so good to be able to have that in your back pocket. There are maps where it just requires you to mirror the Hog.
You are going to see a ton of
win against the Winston. I think we're going to see a lot of Hog. I don't know necessarily whether we're going to see a team play like the Justice, but I think the Hog is unavoidable.
I think you're going to see a ton of Hog Diva, Hog Sigma, Hog Zarya.
Maybe as well, because some of the APAC teams have been playing that a little bit. Yeah. Seoul's been playing that because it's really good at disrupting the dive counter.
There is a month. Like, there will be some shit being played. Like, we're going to see some cheesy strats come out. I guarantee it.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, especially considering the APAC teams have longer to prep for in the conditions that they've already been playing on this entire season.
I thought about this.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to go on, Matt?
No, I was going to ask a question to you guys. If you guys heard anything about when the NA teams are going to leave and travel and how much...
That's what I was going to say. It's like, why wouldn't you just go now?
If I was planning if I was in the top 4, I would be on a flight right now. Because the sooner you get into that quarantine, the sooner it's going to be over the more time you have to prep. Because the quarantine for some of the Western players, if you're Korean, I think they're playing it in Korea, right? The grand finals.
I think so. I don't know.
You would have to assume, right?
Yeah.
I think it's the easiest place to get into, although Korea currently is having a second spike. So
I think this is announced, guys.
Yeah, maybe it is. But also, the teams might not want to go immediately because you need some time to set up logistics to help your players practice in quarantine.
Yes.
Like
Logistics
you might need time to be able
man,
to.
In my opinion,
true.
Like it should have already been planned. Like
I mean, I agree that they should have already been prepping, especially if you're a top 2 team. But at the same time, like you don't want to spend possibly, I don't know how much it's going to be, but you might be looking to spend here tens of thousands of dollars on new small PCs to take in Pelican boxes or some shit that might be an expense that you didn't want to do if you weren't going to have to travel. I don't exactly know, but I can imagine there might be some logistics issue that delays you for a few days because you want good setups when you're actually in quarantine.
Speaking from a pro player experience, though, I do think that the extra bump you have before going to matches, like when you are situated in the country they're going to play in, I think that is massive. Like I would almost take a small hit during quarantine for playing conditions just to like get out earlier, and then you can spend that time like prepping, like watching VODs, talking about strategy, get over that, because then when you get out of quarantine, like, oh my God, you're gonna feel like so much better. You're gonna feel so much better going into it if you have like an extra week to prepare.
The quarantine is rough if you are not a Korean citizen or if you have a place to go to in Korea. Like if you are a Korean resident and you have a home and you can prove that as your home, you can quarantine there, which makes it much easier. The Korean player is probably not going to be struggling that much, but for example, Moth, Super, if they're going to be going over there, people like Funny Astro, when you touch down, the process is, because I was speaking to and I watched Wolf's videos when he went through the same thing. The process is when you touch down, you immediately get escorted instantly from the plane. If you cannot prove that you have an address to go to, like a permanent address where you live on a regular basis, you go straight into quarantine into the hotel. And then it's like a whole procedure. And then you're locked in there for 2 weeks, no matter what. And you have to regularly report your temperature, things like this. I don't know if you can get things sent to you, which means that there is some logistics. Like if they want to be practicing in quarantine, they need to be able to bring a Pelican case full of stuff because there's no limit with the amount of bags you can bring. You can bring, if you wanted to, 4 bags. You just need to be able to carry them, essentially. So it is possible. Like you can set up, and because Wolf and Seth had their broadcast set up in quarantine, they casted the show match between, it was like Runaway and Lunatic High.
Was actually casting these playoff games from quarantine because he mentioned it on the broadcast that he was still going through it.
That's in his current house.
Okay. Right.
So it's a little bit different. But yeah, because they didn't know if the internet was going to be good enough to play in these places, but turns out South Korea, amazing internet. Apparently, it's just 100 up, 100 down wherever you are in the hotels. So yeah, but the point is, it's going to be hard. It's a lot of logistics, right, in place for these teams and the APAC teams. To get back to the original point, because that's what we're talking about, they're not going to have to go for that entire kerfuffle. They can continue as normal, and now they can start prepping right now. Whereas the NA teams are going to be delayed in doing so. So within these 3 weeks right now, my personal opinion is that Asia, I think, looks behind a little bit in terms of coordination and their understanding of the meta compared to North America. But that could easily flip on its head based on the conditions that the North American teams have to go through.
Yeah, I agree with that. And talking about the meta, because that was our conversation previously too, you said that in a month we could see some really weird shit, some wonky stuff come out. And that was actually the narrative throughout this Shanghai Seoul game that Wolf was talking about, because what happened was we got to Hanamura, which was map 3, and it's 1-1, and the Shanghai Dragons got kind of rolled on the defense. They had only been running Winston Diva comps up until this point. They tried to run some Sombra kind of stuff. They tried to run some Tracer Ash. And then I think it got to the second half of Hanamura. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the 4th map even, actually. Yeah, actually, I think it was. It was the 4th map. It was Havana. And they pulled out the Hog. They played Hog Sigma, and they played Double Sniper. And then they continued for the rest of the series from behind 2-1 to win 3-2, running Hog compositions, with then running some Reinhardt on Li Zhang as well. But what Wolf believed was that Seoul had pushed them to the brink where they were forced to show their Hog compositions. Like, they didn't really want teams to be prepping against them running Hog. Now, I don't know whether I really believe this, because Shanghai had shown some Hog compositions earlier on in the playoffs when they played against New York, but that was only for maybe 1 map. It might have been 2 maps, but I think it was only 1 map at the very beginning upper semifinals. Shanghai had shown that they could play Hawk. But I'm not sure whether this was a mid-match adaptation from Shanghai or whether Wolf's right and they just wanted to try and beat them and not show all of the strengths that they had.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, we don't know, right? We're just speculating.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah,
a lot of speculation on our part for this.
But either way, Shanghai have got a load of looks that they could throw at you.
Yeah,
and so does Seoul.
Let's talk then. Okay, a little bit more about Seoul, but let's talk about the Seoul New York match that happened. My God, I was watching this, and Josh, we were watching late at night, and we were live tweeting the exact same shit at the same time because it was just an absolute mess, wasn't it?
It really was.
We all
so
tweeted.
disappointing.
I'm not gonna say I called it, but I did call it.
Well,
what with the original statement?
Yeah,
the T-shirt.
I just knew like that there wasn't going to be adaptations in place, and they were just going to boop. All they did, all New York did in this playoffs. I don't care, if there's fans watching the podcast, I don't care. The only thing they really did was lean back on Mono Winston and Sabi Tracer. And that's
but they didn't even do Sabi Tracer in this match. That's what annoyed me so much.
No, in the playoffs.
Yeah, I know, but that's what annoyed me is that New York's natural style that they've been playing for a lot of the other playoffs is fuck it, we'll throw Sabiobi on Tracer, we'll have Nene on the Ashe, and we'll just put Jonak on Zen, right? And that is like good against Seoul. That is kind of what you want to be playing.
The opposite.
And New York actively opted to go against the countercomp to Seoul. They actively tried to play Haxel on Sombra, which isn't as good as the Tracer.
Haxel on Genji.
And Jonak on the Ana, which is not as good.
Or the Haxel Genji. They were bringing out as well.
Haxel Genji they brought out sometimes to counter the double sniper, which I didn't hate, but then they often pulled it out with like Genji Ashe, which is what the Mayhem did, and it's garbage against these comps.
It was such a frustrating match to watch.
Yeah.
Such a frustrating match to watch because you know how hurt the New York fans are. You know that they have been hurt like this before in playoff scenarios. So at the same time, I'm like, just don't hurt them anymore. Just get the win. Just adapt on the fly. Just actually play what you were comfortable with the entire season long and close it out, New York.
They went backwards.
Yeah, they actually went backwards.
Like they haven't done that before. Like this is in year one. They didn't have a great read on the meta. Jonak tried to force the Zen, but it's all right? You're a dominant team during the regular season. If you think you're good enough to be able to force a meta that no one else is playing, at that point, all right, that was a mistake, but I can see the reasoning behind it. In year two, they send the Vancouver Titans to 7 maps or something. It was a really close game when New York actually looked like they had fire. And then in this year, they plank. They actively go against the countercomps that they have been playing. This was
seeing them play. That was so bad.
When I heard that there was going to be a big patch change before the playoffs, I just had this picture of my head of Sabiol be playing Doomfist in the main melee, and I'm just like no, this ain't it, Excelsior. Sorry. Go next.
The worst thing about this as well is that Seoul, I don't think were playing that well either. I was watching them, and Gesture, I've got a personal theory, by the way, that I've already told Josh about. And I don't know. Do you remember this, Josh, what I was talking about? I've got a personal theory as to why Seoul, in particular Gesture, why Seoul as well, they just seem to turn up a lot in playoffs, right? It's kind of weird, this team. Any team that has Gesture on just seems to perform well in playoffs or have this sign of life almost, that they might turn it up at a given moment.
Profit too, mind you.
Sure. But here's my personal theory, outside the fact. Because I was watching this and I was like, God, Gesture's is playing like an absolute mad bastard. He's going on so many flanks. He's getting away with murder. He was just flanking all the time, playing and he was never being punished because New York weren't running like a Zen or anything. They couldn't punish him. They couldn't just slap a Discord orb on him. So my personal theory is that everybody knows that Gesture is a flashy guy, right? He spends a lot of money on designer clothes. He's always got the Balenciaga.
He was wearing the chains. Did you see with the chains in the match?
The chains. Yeah. He's always got he's got the ice, around his neck, and he's wearing the designer clothes at all time. You ever go out with him?
I've also heard he owns a flower shop. But
this is outside of my flower shop theory, because here's where this is get interesting, and I think there's some credit to this
Look
idea.
at the player cam here, Kurt. Let the player cams come up. I think he's wearing a chain here.
He's wearing a chain. Oh
no, he goes back to Seth and Wolf.
Anyway,
never mind.
The point I'm making is very flashy. spends a lot of his money on designer clothes, right? On the look, on looking just like an absolute swag G. My theory is that Gesture knows. All right, my personal here he is with the chain, right? Here's with the chain. My theory is that Gesture has. Now, this is a little bit rude to speculate on somebody's financials, but I have a feeling that he is literally operating at zero. I don't think he has any savings. I think he spends everything on designer clothes. So when the playoffs rolls around, he is not only motivated by his own desire to win, but he is motivated for, holy fuck, I must win this or else I cannot survive.
Yeah.
I think that he is motivated for the bag. And like, because you always see him go on these crazy runs, man. You always see him. And like, you see Gesture. I mean, Gesture, you know, he's a swaggy dude. He buys the designer clothes. He's always got the chain. This is my theory as I was watching this. I was like, he always turns up in playoffs. And I think it's because he's got this extra thing pushing him forward to get that bag.
Why are your theories always about Gesture? Like you now believe that he's powered by fiscal irresponsibility. You think that his determination to win is a factor of his inability to save money? That's ridiculous.
No, he could be.
Here's where I go.
Listen, it's a little bit in jest. He probably does save his money. He's probably reasonably responsible. I don't want to start this rumor that is Gesture going to be bankrupt in 2021. I don't want ESPN running with that fucking news story. It's a little bit in jest. It's obviously satirical in nature, but wouldn't it be funny?
You've had drinks with the guy. You're close friends, you know.
I mean, I'm not close friends. I've definitely drank with him. I mean, I'm not messaging him in Korean now because every time we meet up for drinks, there's always the language barrier, which you think would be quite weird, but we just scream at each other.
Well, I mean, you guys do a pretty good job of actually navigating through that because, the time, we're not going to delve into it, but the times we do hang out, it's, you make it work somehow. You make it work and you have share laughs and have a giggle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but that's my personal.
He's never brought me around, though. He's never brought me around.
Never brought you around?
Playoffs.
Yeah. I feel bad for New York because, like, I feel like they're always right there, and it just seems like they always just beef it. Like
at this point, I think it's funny. I think it's
is this one more of like a coaching kind of like not having the right answers? Or
yes, I think absolutely yes is the answer to this. I saw Bren tweet something like, "I have never felt like I could coach a top 4 Overwatch league more in my."
That's how I felt watching it.
Top 14 more in my life. Yeah.
And McGravy responded to one of those tweets with like, imagine how bad it feels as a player that knows how the game is supposed to be played, watching these guys. Like the Valiant have already been knocked out and they're watching New York just fumble around as a potential team that could make the top 4. I felt the same watching the Mayhem, though, honestly. When the Mayhem lost to the Justice by running the Genji Ashe kind of stuff, too, when there's so much game tape on the Justice and what worked and what didn't and trying to have different theories, it's so frustrating when there's so much playoff copy. There's so much playoff tape out there, and yet it seems like from the outside that the coaches are too involved in their own team to be able to learn the lessons from the outside. I don't know whether they have guys reviewing VOD of other teams, but if they do have people doing that job, they ain't listening to them.
Also,
really dumb stuff.
I will say the biggest lie in competitive Overwatch that the fans buy into is that pro players somehow always knows best, and they're these like godlike creatures that have like infinite Overwatch knowledge that no one else can really access. You see shit like this, and it's like you realize that Overwatch is a very subjective game. There's so many different takes on how to play Overwatch, what is the best compositions, what are the comfort picks, etc. Like I can't, like that's why you see some teams they play the Zenyatta, other teams they play the Ana, because they have subjective takes on what they think is the best meta possible. So like don't give me this shit that like pro players are just like on another dimension or on another level when it comes to Overwatch knowledge. It's like no. You see shit like this and you realize that you can actually have some arguments about about the knowledge at Overwatch.
To Josh's point though, like we saw teams running compositions against these the compositions like that Seoul and Washington ran that we had already seen over like 10 to 12 maps lose consistently.
Yeah,
I think it's just a bit kind kind of like naive to look at all of that data and be like, oh well, we're just gonna do it better. Like that's not
get it.
And that was and you had that take after already seeing other people have that take and lose already. like it's not like it's not like you. You're not like
the last team. You're the last team. You should be the most prepared because you've seen every other team try a bunch of different stuff against a load of different hog teams.
Even if it's something,
still come out with this.
Okay, so like, hey guys, we got to run something a little bit different. Like we may not have the answer, but at least try to play it different.
So this is where I am the pain in the ass. And I'm not trying to do this to be a pain in the ass. I legitimately just want to cover the topics to not leave the viewers wondering, how we're having these conversations. But if Fusion had lost to the Justice playing Sombra Reaper, we would have said the same thing. Just like, we have so much play tape. They're playing Sombra Reaper against the Justice. What do they think?
But they also played Roadhog Sigma Double Sniper. They played other types of compositions. They didn't just trot out.
They definitely
Sombra
Reaper. But if they had lost Li Jiang Tower and
Tower, and they had continued to play Sombra Reaper, fuck out of them. But if they played Sombra Reaper at the beginning, lost, and then changed to something else, like if they had played Sombra Reaper and then they had changed to the Double Sniper and they had lost all of those maps, I wouldn't have been that mad because they tried something that theoretically can work. But to try and run the same composition across all three of these maps, essentially, where I did Nenny get subbed in for the third map actually? No, he didn't. They just ran CBOB Haxal the entire time, and the only major adjustment they made was putting Haxal over on the Genji.
Which Anubis, which as soon as I saw that map pick, I was like, they're gonna fucking throw and play Genji.
Because at least the Sombra Reaper is a theoretical counter. Like, okay, you have to play it at such a perfect level that, to be honest, it's not a good counter. We figured that out. But at least I can understand the thought process. There is no good thought process, in my opinion, not one that I've heard articulated anyway, for why Ashe Genji should be a decent counter against these Roadhog comps. There is no good thought process for why the Sombra is a better pick than the Tracer, or why the Ana is a better pick than the Zen. And even if there was, you've got all the game tape as well, the actual evidence that it isn't.
Especially after we know they just nerfed Genji to the floor.
I'm just tapping into my hosting role and want to make sure we have our bases covered. So
I like that, Johnny. You're playing devil's advocate because you already you actually predicted the Reddit comment of them saying, "Oh, Philly played Sombra Reaper and they won. Why are they shit talking to Mayhem for trying it?"
I mean, we shouldn't give them the time of day to begin with, Bren.
You predicted it though. You predicted it. And you got ahead of it. I like that
because they didn't just stick on like it's.
Yeah.
There's one thing where the meta is mirroring and you stay on it the whole time and you lose, but when you it's just dumb. They're not.
Here's before we end this debate, I also want to say that this is another hypocritical point right here that Justice fans are going to absolutely maul about and be so upset about, but I don't give a shit because that's how it is. I loved how Seoul actually were so creative going into this playoffs, and they actually just experimented so much. They weren't just playing the defaults. They put creative on Ana, like full time, just benched Budozin and just put creative on Ana. They took Toby and said, yeah, you're a Mercy main now. And they also managed to somehow make Profit and Fitz very comfortable, swapping roles with each other and take turns on the Ashe and allow Fitz to play the Sombra and Profit to play the Tracer. And they allow Gesture of all main tanks in the league. Okay, we know he has the aim, etc. He's taking down Bren. But they just gave him the reins and were like, hey, do your thing in Roadhog, dude. Just do your thing in Roadhog. Mad respect to the Seoul Dynasty for just like going out of their way to just do silly shit like this and making it work and qualifying for the Final Four. So that's hypocritical, as we've just spent like the past half an hour just like punching the fucking Justice, just like you're playing this dumb composition with comfort picks. But here we are. I love what the Seoul were doing in the APAC region.
The Justice probably wish they were Seoul, that they didn't have to sub their main tank out to actually play this type of stuff, and they could actually rotate around through different things. Like
Seoul were actually playing a main tank.
Yeah, Seoul is like the proper evolution of the Washington Justice.
You say that. I don't think they're as clean. Okay, and this leads us perfectly into the next topic is...
They are more flexible.
Let's start a discussion of will Shanghai go all the way? Is Seoul a threat? This is kind of the summary here. Let's start with will Shanghai go all the way? I mean, sorry, I kind of let that on thinking we would talk about Seoul as well.
Yeah, it's like, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize they were split up into two. Can we talk about Seoul first? Do we have a lower third for that?
You're like, this is a great segue into can Shanghai win it all?
So we don't? Okay. I don't think
okay.
It's all good. But we can sum it up.
Between the APAC teams, you mean is Shanghai seriously better than the Seoul Dynasty is?
No.
Is that what you're after?
No, that's not what I'm after.
I think it's more, will the APAC teams...
Will the APAC teams
I think
go
this
far?
idea, well, the subject was, are the APAC teams like the best or North America the best?
We've already kind of established right now that APAC is not as good as North America, in our own opinions, right? Currently, I think... Right now, as it stands,
Shanghai to win
if they were to play tomorrow, I would have all my money on it being a shock Philly finals.
No. No.
Yep.
I think it's Shanghai shock. Shanghai shock, dude.
Well, hold on.
Okay, I mean, are we agreed that the Seoul Dynasty look the weakest of the four? Because that's my opinion, and I think it...
Yep, that's my opinion.
So, what I like about the Seoul Dynasty is that they are more flexible than the Justice. They don't just have to stick to the Roadhog Zarya, but they don't look as disciplined with how they play either. You know, just going on these wild flanks, trying to look for hooks all over the place. Marvel's pretty good at how he supports him on a range of different off tanks, but I don't know whether they really have... Like, okay, you talk about Prophet and Fitz being great, but Fitz looked like he was good in all of the games until he went up against Lip, and then he was getting his shit kicked in. He was getting destroyed in that head-to-head matchup. Yeah. And I personally feel like if Carpe ends up playing the long-range hit scan for Philly and Ants for Shock, that Fitz is probably the weakest of the top four when it comes to that. And even if Prophet picks it up, Prophet's going to be the weakest of the top four as well. Prophet doesn't really play those roles naturally. I don't know whether he's going to be the best. So I think that Seoul are kind of hands down the weakest because they've only showcased hog comps right now.
Anyone who can play
out, maybe.
Yeah. Anyone who can play devil's advocate to that?
No, I mean, my only devil's advocate point is that I made my prediction like 3 weeks ago, in that I think that Seoul would win the first match. That was 3 weeks ago with no insight.
I will say, I think Philly's ability to adapt and play different types of compositions, I think Philly in the next like 2-3 weeks, if this thing kind of goes in the way that I think it'll go, and it'll be something a little bit more Roadhog centric, and then the Winston kind of compositions in certain maps and modes, I think Philly might have a higher ceiling than the Shock in that type of game, where I think Philly Shanghai could be really competitive round one.
I don't know if I think
that what it takes.
Philly Shanghai is a ridiculous round one game, by the way.
Yes.
Every single head-to-head is just absurd.
And we got double LM.
Lip versus Hisu, Sado Fearless, the Redemption Arc. So you got like the best Sombras battling against each other, the Redemption Arc main tanks battling against each other as well. You got Void versus Fury as well.
It's insane.
It's
DJ Gone versus Funny Astro.
DJ Gone. Holy moly.
Do you guys think the... Oh, sorry. Go, Johnny.
Let me blue ball you for a bit. I still think that the travel is going to impact some of these teams. And that's why I think that the Western teams might get off to a pretty rough start here. And, you know, it's pure speculation, but I do think it will impact them in some way.
Okay, let's keep this on track with Shanghai, though. If that match was to be played tomorrow, which team would you have to win?
Shanghai.
I take Fusion.
I would take the Fusion.
I would take the Fusion as well. I am not that confident in Shanghai, and I'm still... We had to record a prediction video, and I'll give you a hint and a little spoiler. I expect it to be a North American Grand Finals. I expect it to be Philly versus Shock in the finals. I don't have that much hope in Shanghai for whatever reason.
I win with. That's the question that I keep coming back to. Like, what compositions...
Yes.
Shanghai play, because if they play the Reaper Sombra Mirror, I feel like Philly, if it was played tomorrow, remember, I'm not accounting for like,
we can't account for 3 weeks time or whatever, but this
if it was played tomorrow, if it was a Reaper Sombra Mirror, any of the maps like that, I feel like Fusion wins. And then if it's kind of some more long range hit scan kind of things, we haven't even really seen Shanghai. We haven't seen the APAC teams play that much of that kind of style. They normally play that style with the Hog. And if it's a Hog Mirror, I don't know, it becomes much more even. I could definitely see the Tracer Sombra being, the Tracer Ash being the place where Shanghai gets the edge if they play that with the Hog. With maybe Lip getting the better end of Hisu and then Fleta and Carpe. I don't know. I think it's pretty close on all comps. Apart from the Reaper Sombra, weirdly, looks much better for Philly.
I almost, like, I haven't recorded that video yet, but I almost kind of been leaning towards where Bren is. The only thing I worry with San Francisco is putting together Roadhog-based compositions with Smurf and Choi.
Hey, okay, well, hear me out with this one. Super on the Hog.
And you just sub in Super every map where you want to play Hog?
This sounds like a meme, but Super's Hog is legit quite good.
But then, like...
We haven't seen it very much.
Yeah.
And it gives you a bit of flexibility. It doesn't immediately lock you into that Hog composition. Super can play the main tank. He can play the Winston.
Yeah, and we know that is very important to the team as well. Like, they will surely try to find a way to integrate Super into here, I think, because he's just going to be so crucial, like in a playoffs format like this. And they've even said, like, how important, like, how much they rate Super to actually, like, help this team, you know, in clutch situations mentally.
And I love Super, and I'm sure he can do it and play it at a high level. I just would not want to be the team that has to travel, quarantine, and play around the new main tank in a different type of role going into, 2 weeks down to the wire, right?
Okay, so this leads us into we've already kind of briefly discussed what our expectations are for Seoul. Shanghai as well, I suppose, but I mean, it's hard to predict how far we want to go with Shanghai. How confident are we in the North American teams?
I'm pretty confident. From what I saw in APAC, if I was the Shock or the Fusion, I would not be as scared as I think I was probably led to believe I should have been as scared. I think Seoul looked good, but I think to Josh's point, anything that comes down to like Prophet versus Once in a hit scan battle, you have to say Once has like a huge advantage in terms of that.
I don't think Seoul is going to allow those head-to-heads to like work out though. I think Seoul will continue to like throw these kind of wonky tactics at them to like throw them off their guard. I don't think you'll see like straight mirror matchups happen because I think Seoul loses those.
Which is why I still think
it's a lot of the Pharah. Prophet's been playing a lot of Pharah.
Which is why I still think Seoul has a chance, because I think they're the one team that can go a little bit justice on us and go out of the box and come out with something that's just because they probably know, Johnny, like to your point, like, hey, if we go in and play like Ash Tracer against the Shock and they play on Ash and then Striker on Tracer, like we may as well just start preparing for the loser bracket, right? So they're gonna have to come up with like some Pharah Sombra type like BS to kind of get around it, which Seoul seems to be willing to go there, right? We don't know how much more they have in terms of like Roadhog Sigma type of compositions with like Pharahs built in. So maybe it is something. I think Shock should have the advantage in that one though, and I think NA overall, I mean it's hard because we as casters we see way more of NA. I mean, I watch the APAC games, but it's very hard to kind of take a barometer to like, okay, like, translate this over. There are some points in the season where I have been all in on APAC and I'm like, NA just looks like there's, 12 teams that just have no idea what's going on. Like, but I think lately, and from what I've seen, NA looked to be really competitive throughout the whole playoff.
It's been back and forth.
Year. Yeah.
This entire year, it's been back and forth. Just the one thing that it's proven is that there is no dominant region. It can change at any given time. And, I mean, we're not going to know the true answer until that first match is being played between those teams, until that first round of the Final Four is played.
Yeah.
We're not going to have a real answer.
Even then, we're not going to quite know because of the stuff like the travel and the quarantine and things like that. So you would expect the North American teams to be at a bit of a disadvantage, especially because something we spitballed about in previous Plat Chat episodes was that maybe the North American teams would have an advantage because they would come in with a style that was new and different, and the Korean teams wouldn't be able to adapt quickly to it because they couldn't scrim against them. But the styles between the two regions, they're pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, can't see them coming up with anything too new.
No, I mean, the maybe the biggest difference is that the APAC region has fleshed out the Hog plus a different off-tank meta much more than the NA region has. So if things go in that direction of like Hog Ball, Hog Diva, Hog Sigma, it seems like APAC has really tested out a bunch of these different comps and what counters what, whereas NA hasn't done that experimentation, whereas NA has got much better at the Reaper Sombra, specifically Philly when I'm talking about this, is much better at the Reaper Sombra, and then Shock looks god tier at the Tracer Ashe, Zen, Mercy kind of comps. I think a lot of it's going to come down to map selection, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, in every single match that you can theorize between these top 4 teams, people are favored on certain maps. You know, like... yeah, go on.
This is why I respect the Shanghai Dragons, because they're almost the team I trust the most. I mean, the Shock. I'm not gonna label us best anymore. It's impossible with these 4 teams. But like the Shanghai Dragons, they do such a good job of playing so many different compositions and like catering the maps to their favor. Because like they can come out and just play like, you know, fucking Lucio Moira, Sombra Tracer. They can play Sombra Reaper. They can play Ashe Tracer. They can play Pharah. Like they are able to like play these compositions so fluidly within a series and then cater the map picks, if they have to pick maps, to their favor. Whereas like you look at some of these teams like the Fusion, you know, they probably have to sub out, like subbing Carpe if they want to play like the Ashe. Like they have some substitutions to be made. If they want to play like the Roadhog Zarya, like do you get Poco in the mix or do you just stick with Sado and Fury? Shock as well. Obviously they stick to their comps most of the time, but they have Super they can sub in. You know, do you want to have Twilight and Violet, or do you want to sub Moth in? Like some of these teams, they have some stuff to figure out, like going into the maps. Whereas the Shanghai Dragons, to me, they're so fluid in their current roster that they can play so many different compositions. That is why I respect the Dragons so much, because it's so hard to prep for them in that regard, because they're able to change the series on the flip of a map so quickly.
What's interesting, as Josh mentioned, is we've seen Asia experiment more with Roadhog plus different type of tank combinations, where in NA we really just kind of saw Roadhog Zarya and at moments Roadhog like Diva, where I'm interested how a Sombra Reaper kind of composition goes up against like a Roadhog Sigma or some of the ball composition. I think there's a lot of different variations that APAC's playing with Roadhog. That'll be interesting to see how it interacts with what North America's been playing.
And that's the reason why I am theorizing that things will trend towards Roadhog plus a different off-tank to be the meta across most maps. Okay, on the control maps, you might be able to get away with some Sombra Reaper or even some Rush Reinhardt comps like we've seen occasionally come out. Like, control is, by its nature, very kind of claustrophobic, and it doesn't last for a long period of time. So the environment you play in is just... you can specialize it much more because you don't go down one, a long map with lots of different environments. So we might see a bunch of different stuff there. But it seems like escort maps, a lot of them are going to be really good for Tracer Ashe, Zen, Mercy. Same with Volskaya and probably Hanamura as well, although I don't expect many people to pick Hanamura. And so I don't know whether specialists... like, I would consider the Shock team right now to be a bit of a specialist. They are the best of the 4 at the Tracer, Ashe, Zen, Mercy comps. That's what they look like at the moment. But they don't look like the best at the Sombra Reaper, and they don't look like they can play the Hog comps that easily without something super in. So I wouldn't say they're the best at either of those two. Can the Shock really win the entire tournament when the only thing they are the best at is those long-range comps? Well, maybe, because they would only have to win one of the control maps at the beginning or the end with some kind of rush comp, which they're also really good at, if they can lock down Assault and Escort. I think we're going to see some really close games when it comes to the Final Four that just ends up being decided on, like, map selection a lot of the time.
Map selection.
Yeah.
That's why I feel I feel really good about, like, the two teams, like Shanghai and Philly, which is kind of a bit of a shame that they have to play each other round 1.
Well, it's double limb, right? So it's,
it's
not the worst in the world.
Because those two teams have just weathered through every meta imaginable throughout the season, and they've also shown the roster flexibility to adjust to a different meta at a high level, at like a top 2 level, right? So,
I mean, I would say that Shanghai also have.
Huh?
I would say that Shanghai also have.
Yeah, that's why I said I liked the Shanghai. And
I thought you said Shock Philly. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Whatever happens, it is going to be shaping up to be a really good, I think, playoffs. I think we've got I mean, the teams that got through, I think the team that I predicted on the APAC side was Shanghai and Guangzhou, but I expected Guangzhou to be a little bit stronger going through the playoffs. But I mean, I'm not complaining to any of the teams that made it through. Like, this is going to be some high quality gameplay.
Open Final Four we've had in OWL, and I think it might be just because of how kind of all over the place the meta is like right now.
I was just thinking, like, these Final Four teams in our grand final event, this could legitimately be the best Overwatch event in Overwatch history. This is going to be insane.
Outside of Seoul, I wouldn't be shocked if anybody else won.
Yeah.
Like if you told me like a shot, Seoul would like surprise me a bit. Like, okay, Seoul's able to get past Shock.
Yeah.
Then Shanghai or Philly, and then one of them again. That would be a little bit shocking. But outside of that, if you kind of like, forwarded me like 3-4 weeks in the future and told me this team won, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like that's how good I think these Final Four teams are.
Yeah. I think that's a very fair take on the situation as well.
All right.
Oh, sorry. There's another amazing storyline coming into this Final Four as well, because we are probably going to get our first repeat winner of the Overwatch League. The Philadelphia Fusion has Fury, who, by the way, if Fury manages to win and he's the first repeat winner of the Overwatch League, and he's been like arguably a top 2 off tank for his entire Overwatch League career, you have to start talking about this guy as a potential GOAT candidate too. He'll have had the most Overwatch League titles. Okay, he didn't have a long and storied history before the Overwatch League, but that kind of like consistency at the top, plus 2 titles, has got to put you in the conversation. Then you've got the whole of the Seoul Dynasty, who are like not the whole of them, but Dosin, Gesture, and Prophet, who Prophet's already a GOAT candidate. If he manages to win repeat titles, that's outrageous. And then the Shock as well, that would be an incredible dynasty to begin with, back-to-back wins. Then Shanghai are the Norton 40 team that might end up winning it, and they're the only team that could stop repeat winners. They're like arguably the most dominant team this year, and they're the only ones without any repeat winners.
Did you see my video from Watch Point in season 1 that got tweeted?
So
where I said that Fleta would be the MVP and we would just get rid of the award because he would win it forever and Shanghai would win, and that Doa wasn't on the broadcast anymore.
Yeah.
Everything came true, apart from XQC casting with Monty.
I was wrong about Monty and XQC casting on that. I was wrong with. And I was wrong about them turning Nate Nanzer into a robot, having to be the commissioner. But
we don't know. Has anyone seen him since he left for Epic?
Epic Games are investing a lot into AI, I think.
They built Nate with the Unreal Engine, and they're loaning him out to other companies.
Maybe Nate will be one of the first test subjects for like Elon Musk's Neuralink, whatever it is. Get a chip into the brain. Who knows?
All right.
I wanted to say on a Fury anecdote as well.
Yeah.
When you brought up that he was like a GOAT candidate as well, it's like I remember him getting picked up for Team Liquid like it was yesterday, man. Because we spent some time. It was in Apex Season 1 or whatever. Me and Internet Hulk, and obviously we scrimmed some of these Korean teams back in the day. And I think Fury played for like Rhinos Gaming or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Very niche team, yeah.
He got picked up for Team Liquid, which I think Internet Hulk was like coaching or managing at the time or something.
It was Internet Hulk that picked him up.
Yeah. And I actually watched some of the first games that Fury played for Team Liquid, and I can remember to this day how he played like Zarya on Hollywood or something and just yeeted like 2 or 3 grabs and caught no one. And I was like, who is this absolute bot lord of an off tank? Just playing Zarya and just yeeting grabs on surges. And I actually spoke to Internet Hulk and I was like, trust me, dude. Fury is going to be an absolute sick off tank. Like, this dude has so much potential.
Yeah. I remember him saying that.
The rest is history.
It spurred me to make a tweet before the Overwatch League even began in 2018 of me saying that Fury was going to be one of the best off tanks in the world.
Yeah.
It's wild we don't talk much more about Fury considering how good he is.
Yeah, he is.
I feel like we talk about like Krong on the show a lot, like Choi and Boy.
He traded a lot of playtime with Poco though.
Yeah, that's
and it's
true.
also it's a very I feel like it falls into the unsexy roles of Overwatch off tank.
Yeah.
It's one that's hard to see the impact if you're not watching quite closely. It's very easy to talk about the impact of Genji players, hit scan players, things like that, even support players. But the off tank is always the unsung hero. So
You want to see an amazing recent map by Fury? Go and watch Lijiang Tower against the Washington Justice. He was everywhere.
Yeah,
his defense matrix was there every time Jano got a hook. He was there peeling for the backline. He was there putting pressure on their backline. He was a menace on that map, and one of the biggest reasons that the Sombra Reaper comp worked as a counter compared to the the times when people have tried it in the past against the Justice. He was insane.
Pretty nuts stuff. I'm closing this conversation off. I've tried to end it like 3 times, and you've all just come in with a new.
One more thing. No, I don't want to.
Storylines.
Shut up. Anyway, let's talk MVP, because it's finally announced. We got announced the other day that we can finally talk about it. The T-Mobile MVP, Fleta, got the award. Not the first choice for me, but I'm not upset with this choice whatsoever that Fleta ended up getting it. I think he was definitely a worthwhile candidate. I think he had more than double the votes of the next candidate when it came to this
crazy
award.
I really hope they make it public who voted for who, because I'm gonna enjoy that so much.
Some of the journalists tweeted about it, actually. Like, some of the journalists wrote an article about the people that they voted for and why. So people are getting ahead of that.
I voted for Void.
I also did, actually. Yeah, I voted for Void. I feel like Void is one of the big reasons that Fleta's had the space on Shanghai to perform, because I don't think Fleta's really gotten better this season compared to what he's done in the past. But he's on a good team now. He's on a good team, and a team that really gives him infinity amounts of space, because their tank line is outrageous. And so Fleta doesn't really have to do too much, doesn't need to carry. He's just so consistent on every hero.
Yeah, it's a super valid take. I voted for Fleta personally. I just think that, like, he has the space, but at the same time, Fleta also enabled it. Like,
you gotta hit your shots once you have that space.
A season of freaking hero pools as well, and there's elite performances across the board. Like, I think there are very legitimate candidates across the board. Like, if you voted for Alarm, I don't blame you. If you voted for Violet, I don't blame you. If you voted for Void, I don't blame you. Personally, I just selected Fleta.
It was
because
funny
of
how
the damage impact this season.
This video where they gave him, they were like, one more interview. And his team's waiting behind him with a cake. Where they just bring it out at the end. It was like it's his birthday.
Yeah. And then Void's sat with the cake, and someone's blasting party poppers in his ear, and Void's like, oh.
Yeah. So apparently Costa gave me this anecdote when we were talking in TeamSpeak during the video as well. And apparently, Costa's, doing an interview or whatever, and they know that it's going to happen, gonna bring in cake, whatever. But, they took so long to bring the cake because they were sneaking up on him that they just sat quietly. And then we're like, oh, wait, there's cake. There wasn't this big celebration. They kind of snuck up on him. We're like, hello.
Look at Void while the party poppers go off behind him. He's crouching, cringing.
I was going to say, I wish in the future for the not voting for MVP, but voting for other stuff. I don't know how you guys felt. I think for role stars, I would have liked to have the main tanks and off tanks separated.
Yeah.
Because I think for me, that was hard. Yeah. And then I felt kind of bad picking I picked 2 main tanks and 2 off tanks. I don't remember which ones off the top of my head.
We can't really talk about it too much because you haven't announced the thing, right?
Yeah. But I think that would be one change I'd like to see, in terms of awards in the future.
You actually can talk about your picks, but I don't think we should. I think we should save it for another day.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day.
I would like to see the Rookie of the Year award opened up to... I was going to say opened up to tank, DPS, and support, but I think this year was kind of crazy in terms of how many rookie candidates we had.
It'll be the same every year, though. It really will. Yeah. The amount of young talent that comes, especially out of Korea, is absurd. And so there's always going to be good rookie candidates. I mean, it kind of got ruined in season 2 because the whole of the Vancouver Titans got picked up and they were so incredibly dominant. So you're picking a rookie not from that team, you're a moron. But in most seasons, I feel like there's going to be a good candidate from all of the roles. And picking this year between insane performances from Alarm and Lijiang on support, and then Krong's probably the best tank rookie that you could ask for, and then Anson Lip. It feels so bad that you can only award one of these guys.
Even MVP, I would have loved if they would have given me the option to have an MVP at NA and an MVP at APAC. On Shanghai, I thought Void definitely had a strong argument for MVP voting, as well. But
the voting process they do in the NBA for Rookie of the Year is that they get you to select your first, second, and third choice and apply like 5 points for first, three points for second, 1 point for third, and they add up all the results at the end with all the people who voted. And that's how they decide who was first. But you get to see who was close second and who was close third in those roles.
That's quite cool.
That would be quite cool to see as well.
They do that for MVP too.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I feel like people think I've seen this on people tweeting at me as well. People thinking that I hate Fleta because I try and because this season I've been downplaying his tracer in particular because I don't think that he's like the best tracer in the league this year. And some other people really do because he's been slapping in APAC. But I think it's like a timing thing. He doesn't have the same ability in duels, this kind of stuff. I do think it's quite interesting that Shanghai looked their worst in the Summer Showdown when Fleta was uncomfortable on playing Genji in that style. Not playing the Genji, because Fleta can play Genji to a high level. We've seen that in the past. But just that style didn't really mesh with him. And then also, I feel like one of the reasons that the Sombra Reaper isn't working for them as well is because, again, that's like a style of Overwatch, this frontline Reaper, I require the resources, I go in and do things, is not really gelling with Fleta either. I just think that's a very interesting part, which maybe you could argue it's because when you get your best player on a role they're not comfortable with, the entire team suffers. But I think it's quite interesting to think of Fleta as actually being one of the key weaknesses for Shanghai throughout some very specific metas this year.
It's something we never had to deal with, like in terms of like an MVP and an MVP vote before, right? Because in season 1, you could just play Jonak on Zen the entire time. It didn't matter. He was dominant. Season 2, we just saw Sinatra install Zarya the entire time and won at the end on Doomfist. So you never had to see like that many people play all the different things.
Yeah.
It's like you could have kind of went around with all the MVP candidates, right? Whether you looked at like Violet, Alarm, Carpe, Fleta. I mean, that's kind of why I felt pretty good about Void. I don't think I ended up voted for Void in the end. I think I kind of made a list like Bren. I had Void like second or third, but I thought Void was like really consistent the entire year. But then I
Fleta was as well. What's so impressive about Fleta is that he just played a bajillion heroes, and almost all of them were elite level. So you can't knock him too much just for having like one or two that he wasn't quite there with.
And if Seoul had a good team around him earlier on, we probably would have won an MVP award before those. So, I mean, that's totally okay.
Very possible.
Probably. Okay. There's a little segment coming up next. Special place in my heart for it. You already know what it is. We already rolled the video by accident.
Johnny's Power Rankings.
Not Johnny's Power Rankings. It's Bren's Player of the Week. 4 teams. T-Mobile. Well, you wrote a clip?
Hello, everybody. Good day. My name is Tony Maloney. And here I'm eating a donut from the finest bakeries in Brooklyn, New York. You might be wondering why I'm here today talking to some of you. It's Bren's Player of the Week, presented by T-Mobile.
I mean,
what's that about?
I don't know. I must have said a lot, but I couldn't hear it. It didn't come out of TV. It did play though, so I don't know.
We didn't hear it either. So it's only the viewers that know what
only the viewers know what It must have been some wisdom. It's probably my prediction for the rest of the season. Like, yes, the final 4 shall be these teams.
I was reading your lips, and I swear to God, you at the beginning said, "Oh, hello, my name's George."
Could have, honestly. I don't know. I played many characters at these intros. My player of the week this week is, so you guys are going to think it's a meme pick, but it's genuinely not. I've given this for some good reasoning. I've given it to John Spector and the rest of the Owl broadcast back. I've given it to John Spector and the rest of the Overwatch League team behind the scenes who have had to deal with this shit show of a season and wrangle it and conform. Oh, okay.
It's George again.
They've done magic with this season. The fact that we even have this situation where we've got 4 teams that are playing in a playoff scenario and we've actually managed to keep this thing on track is astounding to me. I think people don't appreciate enough the amount of work that's gone in over the course of this year. So this player of the week, presented by T-Mobile, goes to John Spector and the rest of the Overwatch League team who were behind the scenes. I mean, everybody knows who you are, but mainly John is, I suppose, the face of that. For doing an outstanding job of really essentially just getting this thing going and even fucking finishing it. Like I mean, it's not finished yet. Don't get me wrong. Right. Something could go wrong, but it's gone pretty well, all things considered.
It's a situation that nobody could have been prepared to deal with or know how to deal with, right? Where I think some of the pain points I've felt like with the league in the past sometimes we're just like not agile enough, right, to like make changes. Where this we proved that we were able to, right? Being able to change the format to tournaments, do the broadcast from home, get like our producers like set up, us set up with all different types of like backdrops, cameras,
the teams as well. The teams acting on their own in some cases as well, and just not like essentially moving to a different region, forcing the entire schedule and the format to change. Like
the wildness that was League Ops being like having to figure out who could play that week and like moving teams around, teams moving regions. You'll never see anything like it again, hopefully.
But
I think it's just a crazy learning experience, and it's really impressive that we were able to pull it off.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that most other esports, or a lot of other esports, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of different esports, they've just straight up had to cancel like some of their biggest events of the year because of this COVID situation. And like, yes, I can understand how you can be like, well, we don't necessarily want to like have a big major tournament or whatever, have like that asterisk with it, where it's like, well, it was online, there was a lot of different circumstances, whatever. It's like, they can make their own decisions. I'm so incredibly happy that we managed to, John Spector and everyone else working on the Overwatch League managed to make this season happen. Because like everyone knows, it's like, we had to do it online. There were so many like different kind of issues. And then as well, we're going to have the Final Four, and like teams will have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. Like there's so many different things, so many different asterisks. But the fact that we managed to make it happen, so many fans at home, they got to enjoy this content and had something to rely on, like some kind of entertainment to watch. I think that just was so big for everyone who was involved and everyone who managed to watch as well. So big props to everyone for making it happen.
What I think gets lost in it as well is like the times have been really crazy, right? And like it's just been a mad dash for us to like kind of get this going from home and get it done and finished. Is that, pre-COVID, the homestands were great. Like everyone was having like a genuinely great time at the homestands, right? Like tons of fans. The players were like, it was super cool to see them in different cities across the country and see the turnouts. It's a shame we didn't get a whole season of that this season, because I think it would have been truly like epic and really special. But I think it's also just kind of truly epic and special. We were able to still have a season. We didn't have to be like, well, that's it. Like, we'll see you guys when we can see you, right? Like, because I know even for us, doing this show is a ton of fun. Because I mean, we don't really have much we can do, right? So we're just kind of hanging out. But
speak for yourself.
I mean, me and Josh, stayed inside. You and Johnny, who the hell knows?
Bren's venturing into Culver City.
Yeah, Bren, that's true. His basement Baron cards.
I'm just stuck in downtown. Everything's closed.
Having,
I moved to
but having Overwatch League to cast, has been awesome.
Yeah, I will say the part of the reason why I decided to give it to John Spector and everyone else, obviously, is that they've done a fantastic job. But also, there's this, I think, a reoccurring narrative of unappreciation throughout our scene, right? And it's because it recently came up about, obviously you can't blame the Justice for their miracle run, but you can blame the system, you can blame the rule, and who do you blame for that? Well, the league. But you have to understand that you make the best of the circumstances, and sometimes there's shit that comes up you cannot foresee. Like that when and as well, I mean, there's many criticisms over the course of the season that I can think of. Back to thinking how they worked out the seeding as well, based on the win percentages.
One week hero pools.
Like all the hero pools or the team or like basically. There's a lot of factors that went into it that you can easily criticize. But given the amount of variables they had to deal with, and given the fact that we still had a season, it could have been worse. You know what I mean? It could have been much worse. And I think we have got a pretty good scenario out of it. We're now going to go to the Final Four, and hopefully it goes well. Again, there could be some logistical issues with it, but I mean, fingers crossed. It's the final stretch is what I wanted to call it. Would have been more fitting.
Also, if when they made that rule, you went to John and said, "Hey, John, but are you worried that the Justice could pick up Decay and there could be a Roadhog Zarya meta where they sub out Roar and they become good?" It would have been like, yeah, we'll take the chances that'll happen. Yeah, exactly. That probably won't. Like you would be like, yeah, that's okay. There's probably not a good chance of that happening. It's just the way the balance and things turned out.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you think there was a reasonable chance that something even worse could have happened, where a team that does make it to the Final Four ends up having a player that was, unavailable to be able to travel over there or didn't want to travel for health reasons. Yep. People tend to not think about the bad things that could have happened had these rules not been in place.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will also just say as well that I don't want the community to feel like they're ungrateful bastards, because I do genuinely think as well that for most of the season, sometimes you've been a bit naughty, okay, Reddit, you've been a bit naughty and you've been saying some stupid shit, I'll have you know that. But for the most part, there have also been like an overabundance of like appreciation threads to the point where I just chill out.
Yeah.
But sometimes we can keep talking about the fact that no one cares about appreciation threads or Reddit or whatever on things, but like sometimes that genuinely makes someone stay. For someone, I don't know, I haven't spoken to Frankie about it, but I can imagine that she's very happy about how she was welcomed into the community.
She tweeted about it, actually.
Yeah,
she tweeted saying,
as a community, that's how we should strive to treat people.
Yeah, because there could have been many different communities that would have been like elitist about it and been like, well, she's not one of us. Like, how much experience does she have? Like coming in here and like blah blah. Like she hasn't been around. She doesn't know the teams. And like, no, like legitimately, they've been very nice and just welcomed Frankie in with open arms and been like, she's been so awesome on the broadcast. She was a pleasure to work with her as well. Like she made me and Costa, bantered with us and makes us look like fools and just like had a giggle. Legitimately had so much fun, and the community just welcomed her in with open arms, and just seeing so much positivity and appreciation and happiness. Like that also, like, we're also stuck in quarantine. We're also stuck in quarantine, mind you, and we try to make the most of it, and like seeing so much appreciation for it. I can't. It's so welcome. So thank you for all the nice comments.
Yeah, well. Instead of appreciation threads, me and Bren need Carapace of Nazoth.
We do actually need Carapace of Nazoth.
Just phase 3.
We're getting very, very close to Mythic Carapace. I will say, while we're actually directly talking to Reddit and the community, I've got a little piece to fucking take out here. Let's go outside and have a little scrap in the car park already.
There we go.
Mr. X use social media.
Mate, part of the thing that stopped me from using social media was I would see these appreciation threads, which was all well and good, but there's so many of you little shits that cannot help but tear
who you are.
That cannot help but tear other people down in the appreciation threads. If you see somebody make a thread appreciating my colleagues, don't fucking write a comment saying, "Oh, I think that they're, well, thank God, they're good because they're not so-and-so." I don't know what the context is, but if you have to tear down another person to bring someone else up, just shut your fucking mouth and rethink what you're saying.
I know.
So we actually made a thing about that.
Reddit has a big issue that everybody's not like me. I've seen that a few times where
nothing annoys me more. Nothing annoys me more, Matt, than people dragging down my friends and my colleagues. It actually pisses me off.
You know what, Bren? You sound like the Washington Justice fans. You're like, you've already made it. You've got to the top. You're an Overwatch League caster, but you just need people to love you as well. Guess what?
I've stopped caring. I'm past that point in my life, Josh. I'm past that point. I'm perfectly happy to be a villain. Like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck anymore. I've stopped caring about that. There was a point in my life where that was one of the only main driving factors. But I think that's a part of growing up and removing the ego from what you do.
Yeah. I think casting and kind of growing up in the Call of Duty scene, which is very large in terms of like social media usage and whatnot, kind of helps me understand that everything is like everything kind of goes in cycles. You're the favorite today, then you do the same thing tomorrow and you're not good anymore, then you do the same thing the day after, then you're the favorite again. I think it's just kind of how things work in terms of like, social, and like things just kind of trend one way and then they trend, not everybody wants to like one thing because then it's uncool, right? So as soon as somebody gets too cool, then it's like, oh, well, I don't like that guy anymore because he's too cool. Well,
is that what you keep saying to yourself, Matt, that people don't like you because you're too cool?
But yeah, I am. I'm too pretty. Yeah, they don't like me because I'm too pretty.
Yeah. That's why I hate you. It's your magnificent, well-trimmed beard.
Yeah, they're at home in their basements, bash on their keyboards on Reddit. I'm good, dog.
What are we doing next week, by the way, for our episode?
It's the awards show. Yeah.
Wait, are the things even announced next week? I don't even know.
I have no clue. But we can say we will have something to go with All Stars. The Talent Takedown.
Yes.
I know everybody's been asking, people are like, who do you think is going to make finals? But the question I get the most is what the fuck is going to happen with the Talent Takedown? So we will have a live draft of the teams of the Talent Takedown. Captain Costa and Captain Jake, they will be drafting the teams here live on Plat Chat on Friday.
Yeah.
And then that'll be a Friday special for you guys. A little live draft of the Talent Takedown. I already see, something's being put in my box, but I think this year's Talent Takedown is going to be epic. I always get excited for the Talent Takedown.
It should be the best one yet.
Well, yeah. I mean, without kind of sounding like, yeah. There it is. Without us, everybody says that every episode we tweet out about Plat Chat is the best episode ever, which is true.
It is true. We only get better every episode.
We just keep setting a higher bar for ourselves.
Yeah.
But this year's Talent Takedown should be the best one. I think we have some really interesting ideas for it. They've given us a little bit more like creative of it than in the past. So I'm super excited for this one.
Yep.
Yeah, it should be really good.
It's gonna be good.
Did you say when it's gonna be, the live draft?
Friday.
Yes, Friday.
You'll be able to see the live draft here on this channel Friday. It'll go live when our episodes normally go live.
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Man doesn't know what time.
What?
PST. You didn't know what the time our episodes go live.
Dude, sometimes sometimes I'm asleep at 10. So
yeah, I don't. Sure. I slept until 1 p.m. today.
Well, actually, no, I'm not asleep at 10 because we do it live. That would be.
This is live.
Of course,
yeah, of course. Anyway, thanks for watching the live episode of Plat Chat, episode 51 here, presented by T-Mobile. Kurt, any final words to the fans?
No.